Okay. Good evening. I call this meeting to order at 6:19 p.m. Tonight we have present directors Teitler, DeFreitas, Ramirez, and myself, meaning we have a quorum. Thank you to our interpreter Astrid. Would you please share the interpretation instructions with our participants? And then we can turn on the interpretation function. The first business in order is the approval of the agenda. Directors, are there any proposed changes to the agenda?
Yes, I would like to propose that we move the 25-26 budget discussion until after public comment.
Is there a motion to move the discussion?
I move that we move the budget discussion until after public comment.
Is there a second?
My second.
Is there a motion to approve the agenda as amended to move item 5, 25-26 budget discussion after item 6, public comment? Yes. Okay.
Is there a motion you're asking?
Sorry, did I say motion again?
I don't know.
Sorry.
I'm
In favor of approving the agenda with the change, moving item 5 below item 6. Say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Okay, motion passes. We've approved the agenda as amended, moving item 5 below item 6. The first business in order is the approval. Oh, sorry. Our next business in order is opening celebrations and updates by our superintendent, Dr. Anna Cole.
All right. Good evening, everybody. Fun to have a full house. So thanks for taking the time to be here. And it's the last week of May. It's the last week of school. There's a lot to celebrate, but we'll try to keep it tight for this evening. Want to congratulate the 66 members of the senior class who earned the Roaring Fork School Seal of Biliteracy this year. The Seal of Biliteracy is awarded to graduating seniors who have studied and demonstrated proficiency in listening, reading, speaking, and writing in English and one or more additional languages. Students were recognized during graduation ceremonies last weekend, but wanted to just give a shout out to students attaining this seal with their diplomas. Also want to let families know that their students' CMAS and COALT, which stands for the Colorado Alternate Assessment, which is a standard-based assessment designed for students in Colorado with significant cognitive disabilities. Individual student score reports will be available for parents in June. So families should look out for information in community newsletters and their school newsletters for how to access those reports. High school students, their College Board account, their electronic PSAT and SAT student score reports are all already available. So we won't have those as a district until late in the summer, early fall, but individual students and families can get access to those scores. The board just spent an hour working through the 25-26 budget and getting a first look at some of the department kind of narratives around some of our department and program budgets, and want to congratulate the finance team for their work pulling these pieces together. The estimates provided during 24-25 for the solutions to fiscal challenges this year and next year have proved accurate, and the first draft of our 25-26 original budget is balanced. We discussed in the board work session that budgets are tight and there are still fiscal challenges to tackle for 25-26, 26-27, but we're grateful for the team's hard work and really turning the corner on turning us towards financial stability, accountability, transparency. So delighted about that. Another thing I want to highlight at the end, there's just so much at the end of the year, but want to share some really big work around career and technical education that's been accomplished this year. We use many indicators to measure student success and achievement. Test scores are only part of the picture. And so we want to celebrate some of the hard work by our students and staff in supporting our growing career and technical education programs. CTE, which is short for career and technical education, participation, and eventually completion metrics are metrics that we're going to start to track because they're aligned to strategic priority number 2, rigorous learning for all. As the board and community is aware, our mission is to ensure that every student develops the enduring knowledge, skills, and character to thrive in a changing world. And this includes helping students navigate and build skills to support post-secondary college and career success. Mitch Foss, who is also our secondary instructional facilitator, coordinates CTE for the district. And so that means he works with a lot of partners, including CMC, Colorado River BOCES, youth entity, and a ton of local industry partners. He also pulls together schools, funding streams, and then rallies students to develop and move forward CTE credential pathways. So tonight, I want to celebrate Mitch's leadership, the dedication of Roaring Fork School District teachers working to develop additional CTE pathways, our high school counselors who really support students in finding paths of interest and then navigating schedules to make all that work. And then, of course, I want to congratulate the students who are taking the initiative to try new courses and explore career options in high school. So just a couple of fun numbers. We had 138 students at Roaring Fork High School this year participate in the construction pathway coursework. We had 57 students at Bridges High School participate in the alternative cooperative education, or what's called an ACE pathway. And that pathway integrates career development, work-based learning, and academic foundations. We've been very excited, especially the second semester, to celebrate the 48 students from Fork, Glenwood Springs, and Basalt High School who participated in the Roaring Fork School District CMC Auto Tech program at the Glenwood Bus Barn. Additionally, there are programs in development. So we served another almost 240 high school students in programs that are still in the early stages of development. These include construction pathways at other high schools outside of Fork, culinary arts, work-based learning, computer science, EMT, health sciences, energy management, electrical contractor pathways, and digital media production. So all of those are kind of in the hopper to roll out, and students are already starting to work on those. Finally, just want to, we're saying goodbye this week to our students. Tomorrow's last day, and most of our student-facing staff as they head off for a much-deserved summer break. So I want to thank them for the gift of time, hard work, and dedication this year. And of course, just want to send our best wishes and congratulations to the class of 25.
Thank you. The next business in order is a strategic plan update presentation from Dr. Cole and a school safety and security annual update from Chief Baumfalk and Dustin Garrick. After the presentation, each board member will have 2 minutes to share comments or ask questions.
All right, so Dr. Park's going to join me for this first part of the report. The purpose of this report, the first half, is to provide an update of the first year of our strategic plan, to share some of the outcomes, challenges, successes, and next steps. This is part 1 of 2 presentations that we'll have for the board and community on strategic plan year 1 outcomes, as we won't have all of our student data until next fall. There was a substantial memo included in the board packet, so Dr. Park and I are just going to really cover some highlights for the first year of our strategic plan. So the 24-29 strategic plan was developed in a cadence that was set over the last 13 years, but it's very different than what's come before. And a couple of critical components in the plan's development and implementation make it distinct from the 2 plans that preceded it. The board will remember that we actually began this work in the 22-23 school year when we contracted with Attuned Education Partners to begin to support us with the development of a strategic plan. And they did this first by conducting a comprehensive assessment of the district's performance on a number of indicators to identify strengths and key gaps. We've never done that before. This resulted in Attuned creating an organizational diagnostic that was presented to the leadership team and the Board of Education. And it essentially was a very thorough report card of the district. Attuned Education Partners then engaged our planning team in a rigorous root cause analysis, especially focusing on key gaps that were identified in that organizational diagnostic. And then Attuned led our team to work with evidence-based tools and strategies that helped us design key priorities and initiatives. Also, unlike previous year's plans, this plan has specific targeted metrics to measure and monitor the implementation of the plan, strengthening accountability across the board. This year, those metrics were visualized on a comprehensive data dashboard to increase transparency and accountability with the community. So these components make the plan that we started this year incredibly different than anything that's been done before in the Roaring Fork schools. The board will remember this slide that Attuned Education Partners shared with us as part of their report back on the organizational diagnostic, you can see highlighted the key gaps that they really named that then led to root cause analysis, evidence-based strategies that guided our plan. The board will remember that then what we came up with was 5 key priorities that are right behind you on the poster. That then under each of the priorities have strategic initiatives to work on each year. Folks who've messed around a bit on our website will know that there is a strategic plan data dashboard that you can access and get real-time data to see where kids are tracking and the programs are tracking. This like daily attendance is updated daily, and then other metrics are updated as we have them. And that is now live. So what else makes this plan different? Because this has been a really a significant year in launching this plan. And a couple things that we want to highlight. Something that's present in each of our 5 priorities and their accompanying initiatives is a foundational commitment to building a stronger data culture in the Roaring Fork schools. And so this means that we are going to get a lot clearer about where we are as a district, where our students are, where we need to go, and how we're making progress. This includes many initiatives, systems, and structures that we really need to give Dr. Park credit for leading as Chief Academic Officer and Assistant Superintendent. Consistency, accountability, and clarity are themes that she has integrated into systems that run throughout our academic and school programs. They include things like tightening up our in-year assessments, beginning and middle and end of year assessments for students in math and language arts, instituting school-wide data review professional days, ensuring that schools and leaders and teachers have better data visualization tools to know where their kids are. She's strengthened with, again, clarity, accountability, and transparency and consistency, our processes around educator coaching and educator evaluation systems. She is completely transforming our data culture. It's true. And it's a big team, but it's been slow, tedious, technical systems level change. I want to acknowledge that this plan and the work that's been done around strengthening data culture is not a flashy or sexy new strategy or a new program. It is a systems-wide commitment to measuring what matters and strategically using that information to drive student outcomes. It will have lasting transformative impacts on student learning. Additionally, I think a couple of things that have come up in the development and implementation of this plan is that we've recognized critical mindsets that we have to shift to attend to this work, specifically urgency and efficacy. Our leaders, teachers, staff, and students must maximize every moment of our time together to deliver for our students. We really only have them a small portion of their waking hours. And importantly, we have to believe deeply in the efficacy of our students, staff, and our systems. We absolutely must hold ourselves accountable and shift practices when they aren't working, but we have to be confident in our ability and in our students' ability to meet the goals in our plan. As educators and leaders, we have to unpack our expectations and biases around race, language, poverty, ability. We have to believe in the capacity of our students and the families we serve. We continue to refine and better leverage these mindsets, but it's becoming clear from our most successful teachers, from the school leaders driving positive change, and from the families who are leaning into problem solving that we have to approach this work with urgency and efficacy. Now is the time, this is the right work, and we're capable of it. What we're going to do is go through a little bit of each of the 5 priorities and some of the work that happened this year, strengths and challenges and outcomes, and where we're headed for next year. So Dr. Park's going to take us through the first couple.
I do want to say it's a lot of people working together on all the data pieces, so not myself. But in terms of priority 1, students first, our school leaders, deans, and students are really highly engaged in the initiatives and students first. And so this year 1, as it relates to student leadership, students have developed a leadership survey and they're gathered perspectives from nearly 1,200 high school students, and they're prepared to analyze and respond to that information, really to improve students' sense of inclusion, belonging, and representation. And of course, our deans and leaders are continuing to refine school culture systems and handbooks with the goal of being very explicit and clear on what the expectations are and codifying them so it is known to everyone, including the adults and the kids. In terms of our data metrics here, we have some highlights, and you can see them on the slide there, but they do include significant drops in ISS and OSS, and of course, our expulsions, and including referrals. We do still see disparate outcomes by race, and so we're continuing to work on that next year. And our attendance rates have hit a bit of a stall, just hovering around 90%, 91.1%, as you can see. So our goal is 96%. We are not quite there yet. And we have a ways to go. As it relates to year 2 of our strategic plan, we will add pilot projects in just the data-informed social emotional learning integration. And our goal there is to make sure that we are incorporating that, integrating that throughout the day, not just in 20 minutes a day. And making sure that the interventions and re-engaging with the fidelity of our absenteeism plans, our district attendance plan actually from 2 years ago, again, to increase and improve our attendance rates. Priority 2 is rigorous learning for all. This is really the heart and the meat of what our ACES team and our instructional teams focus on. We've made progress this year in the rollout of GROW, which is the educator coaching platform, which has really helped strengthen accountability and streamline communication between multiple people who work with our educators. This year, we also opened the auto tech program and continue to have high interest from students into next year. And finally, we're on track with 2.5 in developing and launching a daily universal lesson planning and internalization template. And that is intended to support educators in understanding the core of what they're teaching each day. In terms of some highlights and challenges, we've moved forward a number of projects this year. I named a few of them already, and they also include skills alignment with our high school ELA teams. That was something that was identified as a need, and the high school teams have worked very hard on that this year. We're also in our second year of illustrative math implementation in elementary schools, and that means we're in our really second year of K-12 alignment in terms of our math curriculum. And we have plans for regular effective DIS walkthroughs for math in elementary especially, and we're continuing to explore additional CTE pathways. Next year, one of a new initiative that we're launching is just developing and establishing divisions of excellence more across more content areas and grade level content areas. And it's really to get explicit and concrete on what deep student thinking and grade level student work looks like and sounds like. And so that is in the works for next year. And you can see some continued other notes for year 2 in that right-hand column.
Priority number 3, as the board and community is aware, financial challenges really forced us to delay some of the initiatives here. Despite postponing initiatives in some of these areas, including communications, we instead focused on quality execution of key district communication channels. I think one thing we want to lift up, and we'll hear more, the board will hear more about the Panorama Family Survey at our June meeting. But what's interesting is that even though we weren't able to do some of the new work in district communications by focusing on the quality execution of our existing channels, we saw family survey feedback related to district communications trend upwards and actually achieve the highest levels of positive feedback since we started the Panorama Parent Survey in 2019. Next year, we'll pick up on financial excellence and staff recruitment and retention action plans. Student-centered partnerships, priority 4, lots of work here from the Family Resource Center taking the lead to develop a toolkit of best practices and partnering with families to drive student success. Our toolkit is aligned to the CDE's Family School Community Partnership Evidence-Based Framework and will be launched with school leaders and teachers next year. Priority number 5, although some components of these initiatives have been delayed, we completed a staff recruitment and retention roadmap in partnership with Promise 54, and we look forward to supporting the new leadership in human resources and talent development next year with the implementation of those plans. We're on track with the staff housing master plan, and we'll be discussing next steps with the board at our June 11th work session. We couldn't, and again, I know that's very high level of what happened in year 1 of the strategic plan. We will do a part 2 in the fall with additional student data. And again, if anybody's interested, there's a ton more information in the board memo it's part of the board packet. We couldn't do any of this work without partners and are grateful for constituents who've helped us. This board is familiar, and I know that folks are out in representing tonight Voces Unidas, whose advocacy for stronger communication of our plans, especially with Latino families, resulted in the development of communication tools that we will launch next year, including some shorter, punchier videos in English and Spanish that kind of explain the plan and its purpose and goals, and then some two-pagers that really help distill some of the information for families. The board has also been doing a lot of work and alignment to push those themes around accountability and clarity and transparency. The board's engagement with key policies this year have strengthened accountability metrics that will be integrated into our plans. And then as we look ahead, much of our year, as I already mentioned, we'll look at more of that year one data in the fall. But want to just name for the board, for the community that we're moving into year two of this strategic plan, which is truly a systems-wide effort to strengthen accountability and delivering on our mission. Its success is entirely dependent on our ability to follow the plan with discipline, consistency, and a laser focus. Doing that was incredibly difficult this year as we faced significant financial challenges and turnover on senior and district leadership teams. And yet we still made forward progress, especially setting up data management and data monitoring systems. And we're looking forward to launch year two with strengthened focus and clarity. I know the board's going to have a lot of questions, but want to make sure that Dustin has time to give you an update on safety and security.
Thank you.
But we'll hang out.
Just going to say a couple words to introduce this topic and then hand it off to our school safety and security coordinator, Dustin Gehrig. Want to just acknowledge that there's a lot of work that goes into school safety and security that we're not going to talk about tonight. And that's what we call that upstream work, having the school-based mental health providers, having the family liaisons connecting with families, a lot of the work that Dr. Cole was just talking about a safe and inclusive school where everybody feels a sense of belonging. That's arguably the most important things that we can do so that there's not a reason for somebody to lash out at their school. Having done as much as we can and continuing to do as much as we can in that area, however, we do have to take care of the kind of the what ifs and the drills and all that stuff that everybody's familiar with at this point. And that's Dustin's role. And I would just say, as we talk about this, I think it's a really strategic move made. We're just at the end of 2 years having this role where somebody's full-time job is to think about what are we doing every day to keep our schools safe and our staff and our students and our community. Without that role, it's a little piece of my job and a lot of other people's jobs. So everybody takes collective responsibility, but having somebody solely focused on this has been really valuable. And Dustin's just going to share some highlights of what we've done in year two.
Yeah, so just kind of reiterate what Ben said here. We're in year two of this full-time role. And last year we kind of introduced the 5 pillars of school safety. So that aligns with the national preparedness goal from the Colorado Office of Safety. So that's kind of how we've aligned how we look at things. Every section, how are we getting better every year? And those 5 pillars that we're working with are prevention, mitigation, protection, and response and recovery kind of go together. Again, Ben mentioned this as well, but we work with the upstream kind of things too as well. We're just one facet of school safety all around, right? So building security is one part of a bigger ecosystem, and we work with those teams. I work with Joel, working with the school culture and the threat assessment teams and our mental health providers as well. So all of that works together to make a really solid school culture, along with the building safety, to hopefully that students and parents and educators feel safe in our buildings. One of the few things that we want to highlight in this prevention, we're actually in the process of almost done with camera surveys. We're conducting those right now to see what our coverage and our needs are. We are finding some gaps in there and how we can maybe move a camera, get a new camera so we have a little more coverage. I think with the renovations that were on before my time, obviously, the focus was on doors and most common areas, but we're still finding little gaps. And of course, our admins will always talk about, hey, I can't see this, I can't see that. So we want to have a really good idea and map everything out so we can give them the resources they need to be successful as well. Last time I was here, we talked about the safety vulnerability assessments that we conducted last year, and we scored those out and we could see where we were vulnerable and where we had strengths. So going into this year, we had kind of a guideline of where can we be improving at. So we did a few things over the year. We added some locks, we're adding some fencing, door numbering, things of that nature to kind of increase those scores. And I'll kind of revisit this again as we go through that. The site vulnerability assessments will work on an every other year kind of schedule. We'll work on it 1 year. We'll do the assessment 1 year. We'll hopefully see, kind of implement some things and then see improvements on the next year. So next year, those vulnerability assessments will be conducted again, and hopefully we'll see kind of by numbers where we are improving. One of the things that we kicked off this year as well to kind of enhance that school culture, and so I'm not thinking of things all on my own, is we started the Safety and Security Committee. And that was with building level staff that gives them a voice in their safety and security, and they can bring those issues into the committee meetings and talk about what's important to them or what they feel like is a glaring thing that we need to start working on. And they can voice those concerns. Also, if we've implemented something and they have concerns about what we've implemented, they can voice those concerns there, and we can talk that out and, make sure they get the support and the resources they need. Part of those site vulnerability assessments, and I'll probably go back to this a lot, or people that know me enough, I talk about doors and open doors and entry control. So Glenwood High this year, they kind of piloted a securely visitor management system, which is pretty exciting. That's an ID scanner that comes in, and it takes roll of who's in the building when they check in, when they check out. We have staff doing that as well if they travel to other buildings. And then I'll also kind of come back to what I'll talk about a little bit later is reunification. Reunification, we have to have accountability for where people are at, not just our students. So we want to be able to account for who's in our building, if we need to go find them in an emergency or anything like that, including our staff. Mitigation, this comes really, really down to our drill procedures. And every time we do a drill, we try to simulate as close to real life as we possibly can. We get law enforcement involved or fire department involved, depending on what drill we're doing. And that way we can also get real-time feedback. We also instituted a debrief form at the end of every drill. So admins can give me feedback. Hey, this isn't working. I couldn't hear this alarm, so on and so forth. And we can begin to address those issues, or they can talk with myself, law enforcement or fire at the time and say, hey, how can we be better? Or if those entities see something that we can be better at, we can fix it the next time. So it's really good. Approximately at this point in the year, obviously we're almost to the end. We've done approximately 175 drills across district wide. I don't know if it's 175 exactly. I know north of 170, so we're right around in that area. So we're close enough there, but it's been a lot. Protection, collaboration with emergency personnel. I kind of mentioned this before with the drills. Worked very closely with our SROs. Our SROs also get involved not just in the law enforcement portion, but also get involved in education in the classrooms and things. So they'll go in and maybe do an hour on case law with a class, or they'll talk about underage drinking or something like that. That's a picture there of Jason Hegberg, our SRO out of Basalt. He's fantastic. And so we're encouraging that as part of our MOU to get them more involved in the education aspect of it, to kind of get ahead of things before they become issues. I was also given the opportunity to be involved in some wildfire planning here in the Valley. The Glenwood Springs had their Colorado wildfire planning, which is a 10-year plan. Was able to sit in on that and give kind of voice to the school district of what our assets are and what we worry about in terms of wildfire. I was also able to, we have buses, we can move people if we need to. So we have resources that we can help communities as well. So that was a really good part of that. And that was with stakeholders throughout the Valley. We're in that meeting from BLM, city officials, school officials, law enforcement, fire. It was quite a diverse group. So it was really valuable. And then working with our emergency response, going back to like reunification, law enforcement also uses, usually in the summertime when no students are around or anything, they do training in our buildings. They become familiar with our buildings and things of that nature. So they are recognizing what our needs are inside the building and how they can be better to respond to our needs. Response and recovery. These are two big things that came out of this year with the Stop the Bleed program. Went through the Colorado Office of Safety. We were actually given free Stop the Bleed kits, which are trauma bleed kits from the state. Colorado Office of Safety here again. Every school was able to get free kits depending on enrollment, range from anywhere from like 3 to 5 kits they were able to get. So they'll have them in their building. We initially trained all health aides and nurses to acquire the kits, which was a smaller number of people, but we were able to expand at the end of the year here. All staff in Basalt schools are trained now, and we're going to expand that to all staff in Glenwood, all staff in Carbondale as well. Stop the Bleed, is not just anything for something, an accident that happens at school. All the staff were able to handle the kits, see what's in the kits. You know, we live in an area where there's hiking and camping and all this other stuff. So they're able to also take from that and glean from that how they can build their own kits and take that home with them. So it was really valuable and it was really good. We worked in tandem with Salt Police, Roaring Fork Fire. We had a member from Red Cross and there was a doctor there, but I'm not sure where they were from right off the top. And the other big thing that was kind of a big lift was our reunification this year. Our reunification, when I looked at it, it was big and cumbersome and things of that. So I went to a training and they showed us how to really streamline that process and make it, you know, much easier to understand and not so cumbersome for anybody to pick up and do. So was able to streamline that process, kind of work with other team, the ACES team, the FRC, data team to work through all of our really kind of our moving parts of reunification. And then we were able to train district office staff, roughly 35 staff members got trained on how to do reunification. We obviously in the case of a reunification won't need all 35, but it's always good to have backups. We did that training here at the district office in the fall, winter time. And then we were actually able to go to one of our reunification sites and do an on-site training as well. So that was really valuable in getting the team out there and having them change roles, whether they be playing the role of a parent or a child or whatever. And so they got to see the process and work many roles. So it's kind of interchangeable. The goal for that is to continue to train it. Obviously, we've only done one of our reunification sites. We have a couple more, like to do a couple more on site. So we continue that training and keep that kind of fresh, hoping that we never have to use it. That's kind of the thing, but we want to be prepared in the case. And the staff has been really good about buying into and really getting into that process. Kind of our next steps. Really always focusing on that school culture and getting the buy-in from staff. You know, we can do whatever we want. We can have all the nice toys and the new fancy thing that comes out in the world of school safety, but the staff have to buy into it and believe in it and want to use it and use it properly. So we're always working on that school culture and giving feedback and talking with them and really, you know, hearing their voice when we put things in place and their concerns as well. So always building that school culture and buying it. Like I said, we want to reunify, we want to do reunification training at all sites, maybe do one, maybe possibly two this coming school year. Stop the bleed. We want to extend that to Glenwood and Carbondale schools, get all the staff trained, and then hopefully that gets the big work out of the way for that. And then we can just kind of do new staff going on. As always, we're looking at new emerging trends and best practices that come out. School safety is kind of an ever evolving practice. We learn something new every time there's an incident. So always looking at those best practice. And then obviously do some long-term planning. Where can we get to where we want to be? How long is that going to take? You know, commitments and things of that nature. So getting into that long-term planning, the 3 and the 5 year type planning. So.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we'll now have 2 minutes each. Director DeFreitas, would you like to start? Sure.
Dustin, thanks so much for being here tonight. It is Dustin, sorry.
Yeah.
Good. Thank you. I really appreciate the thoroughness that you put into the planning, and I appreciate the school board's investment and school district's investment in your position to make sure that we have proactive plans for a lot of things, because reactive is
Yes.
we're done. So I just really appreciate the time that's gone into that. And I had one question about reunification training for you. Has that been structured to provide translation services on site or direction for communities that don't speak English?
Yeah, so in the compass of the whole thing, like I said, we have 35 members. So really in the sake of the actual reunification, you probably only use 15 of those people. So we have 20, hopefully, if everybody shows up, we have 20 satellite members that are there. So in that process, we don't have specific for that, but we have our FRC team that we can say, hey, can we get that services there? We need them. We have Octavio with food services. If in case anything runs long, we can do that. We have our counseling services. We can set up brief counseling on site. There's areas for law enforcement and everything like that on site. So yes, it's kind of built in with our teams that we can ask them, hey, can you reach out, you know, the resources and help us out there.
And I might just add, the intentionality around that was to involve the Family Resource Center. Every family liaison is on that team and they're all bilingual. So they're being trained in the parent interface role so that everybody that a parent would interact with would be bilingual.
So it's likely in a scenario where there's an emergency and tensions are high, adrenaline's running, and it's already traumatic, that they would have, every parent would have someone that they could maybe recognize on that team on site potentially and
Hopefully.
speak to.
Yeah, and the challenge is that, you imagine an incident, you engage the reunification protocol when a school has to be evacuated. And so you imagine that something traumatic has happened at that school. It could be a gas leak. It could be an act of violence. It could be anything. The staff from that school, including the family liaison, are probably involved in just taking care of the kids. And so all these other people might not actually be familiar to the parents who show up, but there will be a lot of teachers and staff and family liaisons. There's kind of a student gathering area, and they'll be in there managing them. And then there will be other people kind of working with parents.
Thanks. And then looking back to the strategic plan discussion, I really appreciated a lot of the comments that you opened with highlighting how this plan is shaped and will be measured very differently from previous 5-year plans, and highlighting despite the financial challenges we've been focused on this year, being able to bring the data dashboard online before the end of the year so that as that data becomes available, it's accessible to all of the community. I think I just want to highlight and appreciate the staff for the amount of work and focus that it took to get that across the finish line, because I feel like that's a crucial part of the strategic plan is the transparency and accountability that's baked in. I had a question specifically related to the culture building. Sorry, which number that was. Basically, I was looking at the suspension rates, and the racial gap in those suspension rates, and I think it was labeled on track, and I think I need to know a little bit more about how that means it's on track. So it was.
Sorry, yep. Sorry, I'm trying to find that slide.
There's sort of two metrics there, and the reduction in in-school suspensions and in out-of-school suspensions, there was a 5-year goal that was hit based on a benchmark from last year, and that part of it is on track. But you are correct that the disparity, the gap, is not.
Are we adjusting how we're approaching that next year with that in mind? I mean, is it, maybe talk to me about where we are in that process? Are we changing things up, looking at that disparity now?
Yes, I think that as we continue to develop professional development with both school leaders and school deans, that's a primary area that we know we need to focus on next year.
Can you just name what you're doing next year to focus on that? Sorry.
Yeah, I can. I don't know if if what I'm about to tell you is specific enough for what you're looking for, but what I feel that we need to interrogate with the way that we respond to disciplinary incidents is about examining our rules and our expectations to be sure that they are clear to everyone, to every student, that everybody has that same degree of clarity going in about what we expect. And I also think that we need to think through what interventions we have in place, like whether those are relationship pieces or skill building pieces that are just landing for some students and not others. So this year, the focus was really on response. And I think next year, the focus needs to be on those proactive approaches. What is it that we could do differently?
Dr. Tyler?
Dustin, thank you for coming in and presenting to us. You had mentioned about the integral part that the SRO and Basalt is playing there. Do you feel like we as a school are compromised as a school district by not having an SRO in Glenwood Springs?
Best practices would say to have an SRO. There's no way around that. If you're looking at a top 10 list, it's definitely in the top 3 to 5 to have an SRO there. As I've talked to the staff and the chief in Glenwood, it's a staffing thing for them. So it's hard for them to pull somebody off and put them in that full-time role. They've done a really good job though of being responsive to what we need. They've kind of pieced it together when it's this person, this person, this person. We don't have that. The one thing that gets missing from that is building that relationship with that one SRO in the school that gets familiar. But we are I guess I don't say lucky, but they've had a couple people on staff that have been SROs in the past. And so they've been able to respond when we need them at Glenwood. And so that's been more positive because they are still familiar, but they're doing what they can for us. And so far they're doing a fairly good job, but it's not as good as having an SRO there.
Dr. Park and Dr. Cole, I have some questions about our new plan that we have, our strategic plan. Attuned Education Partners mentioned that there are key gaps in classroom teaching and opportunities for students to cognitively engage. And when we look at all the plans that are being put forth, there's very sound educational programming that we're looking to put forth. Yet it seems to be in like year 2 plans, missing from that is any specific instance indicating what we need to do for our English language learners. We don't have any metrics there. None of our data that we were showed any metrics about our achievement for our second language learners. How will you be then? What is the goal for those metrics if there aren't any metrics being put forth for the next year's plan?
Can you clarify which metrics you are looking at? Because we have disaggregated measures embedded in all of them. So I just wanted to clarify.
You mean in the data?
In the dashboard, yep.
That I understand, but when I'm looking at like our priority for year 2, and when our readouts of the data that we talked about in priority 1 and priority 2 from this year, none of that specifically mentioned any of the data of how we are doing or not doing. And if we're not naming it there in our next year 2 plan specifically, how is it that we are targeting that?
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at our annual measures, there's a frame that's an annual measure, and we have year over year targets that's disaggregated by language the extent to which like those targets are set to improve, to see year over year improvement for emerging bilingual students and for students holistically. And so there are targets within there. I'd have to look again at the data dashboard, but when we initially wrote the plan, we have very clear 5-year targets for CMAS, for PSAT, for access scores, for DIBELS and Lectura, for growth and achievement, for all of those pieces, for graduation rates, that get us to that 5-year goal incrementally. And so those are baked in and should be visible on the data dashboard on the annual measures. And then those in-year metrics are telling us how far we are to that year's target.
And I guess I would just question, like, when we're looking at the highlights or the challenges and we're saying that we didn't meet the in-school suspension versus out-of-school suspension when we're disaggregating, there is no mention of that, of how we have done in our in-year measures for Anglo versus Latino. And is that, how are we reporting that out as far as like that in-year measure? Because I don't see that in the priorities for next year. In the same way.
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of the in-year measures, we literally got the end of year measures uploaded this week. And then this like CMAS, PSAT, graduation rates, we won't have till the fall. So a lot of that'll be in that part 2. But we are, I mean, just today, I think our leaders got an email really summarizing like our DIBELS and Lectura scores that are in-year measures, and being supported by the ACES team and the instructional facilitators to say, okay, let's start looking at your end of year data and digging into that, because then that'll really guide. What happens is every school then works through that data to guide their school strategic plans, their unified improvement plans that come about in the fall, and then roll up into our district ones.
Thank you for that. I understand that. I still feel like in our year 2 priorities, we're not explicitly stating this is a measure that we are not achieving at this point. And yes, I understand it, but I feel like in our year 2 plans of saying these are the things that we're going to work for, that we need to be more explicit in naming this is what we need to work towards.
Fair. And we can also, 2 thoughts on that. One, we can figure out how to make that. I mean, we're still trying to figure out how to best leverage the communication tools on the website. We can certainly lift that up on the pages that describe the initiatives, and we can certainly make that more visible on the data, the in-year measures, what our target is, where we currently are. And I know we've been playing with that with our developer of how to show that there's a couple ways. Thank you. There's a couple ways I think we can.
And I understand
Yes.
that, and that would be a great place in the data dashboard, but more I'm talking about still in the year two notes and the year two plans. Nowhere in that as year two plans is explicitly stated, we need to close this gap as our year two plan when we're talking about rigorous instruction for all and achievement. And I think that needs to be specifically named.
Okay.
Thank you.
Director Ramirez.
The like end of year. We won't get them until the fall.
To maybe get aligned with this update, you need to readjust for next year. I think that would be better.
That's why we were saying this was like part one of the year one wrap up and part two would be in the fall. Exactly because of that, because we realized that we don't have all the data. We also didn't want to end, I mean, we have to be like, as a team, we have to be talking about year two. So we didn't want to wait 5 months to hear like this kind of feedback. Like we want it more visible. We want in those tools. But yeah, I appreciate that feedback and we can, I think this is also the accountability that the board brings to this work and these kinds of conversations. This is what we want to see. This is when we want to see it. This is huge. This is work we've never done as a district before. And so it's super helpful because the process, I mean, this is our first shot of like, let's do this in 2 parts. We'll do one in the spring, one in the fall. Maybe that's not quite right. And it needs to be everything all at once.
Yeah.
Love it.
I wanted to follow up on that comment that we're getting. Really quick, Dustin, the safety and security committee who's represented.
Currently Joel was on it. We had a couple teachers and we had a couple administrators, but they were unable to make it for our first meeting. So it's usually teachers and administrators. I open it up every time we're going to have a meeting, which probably going to do twice a year unless the group feels that we need to do it more, but it's open to any teacher or administrator at the building level. After school, we try to do it that's why we try to not have it all the time. So we usually do a 45-minute agenda. Just do it real quick after school if they have any concerns or they hear things that are upcoming, so they're aware of it. Yeah. Yeah, it's open to any building admin or teacher. They're more than welcome.
Your character will that be done and updated by?
We have 2 left. I have to do the Glenwood High School and Crystal River. So they should be completed in a couple weeks, I would say. And then we upload those maps. Then tech is uploading those maps. So we have it all.
And a couple of weeks between and June.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then just do the question that Director Tyler shared about that. What have you felt from your relationship with the Glenwood PD, especially with the events we've had last year? Has that been difficult for you? Do you feel like your relationship has become fruitful because you have to speak to the chief directly?
It does help. And then there's been some changes there too, as far as Glenwood. The chief has taken a little bit different role, so there's a deputy chief, but Glenwood PD has been very open and the lines of communication are very open. I have a direct line to the chief. I have a direct line to the deputy chief. Every time I've talked to an officer that's had to respond to anything or come to the school, it's, hey, call me directly or whatever, but they've been very open and very responsive to any time I call. Usually I can get the chief on the phone in within the hour if I need to. So he's been very good about being responsive to our needs.
On the strategic plan update, I just had a couple comments. Thank you for the memo. I think it's really important for you to do the memo. I think if there's anyone in the community that is interested on your updates, they should consider reading the memo for you to plan. I did have some questions. You did mention the delays and the difficult year we had. Do you see or expect there to be more delays on any of these priorities?
Such a good question. I think it would be I think it's worth us considering delays around superintendent goals and that things get implemented and executed on time. Looking ahead, I don't know. I mean, I think this year's financial challenges caught us off guard. We knew operational systems needed strengthening. I think we didn't know the depth of the systemic errors. I mean, I think that as we get better at this and better at understanding and prioritizing our work, we're gonna get better. I can't say that there's not gonna be any delays, but I have a lot of confidence in the team that's here now. Our strategic leadership team is made up of anybody in the district that owns an initiative. And we've really started to build a cadence of accountability and reporting and ownership, and even course correcting, through some nice analyses that our senior project manager, Jonathan, has helped us really bring to that team to bring accountability into the system. So I actually feel like we're going to get better at implementing those initiatives. I have a lot of faith in the leaders that we have on the team and their continual capacity as this gets more routine. So I don't know that nothing will get delayed, but I am feeling confident about where we are heading into year 2.
I think it. On the board's priority, because I do think, this year, it was understandable. I think it was a lot of things, you're transitioning, there was a lot going on, but, that's why it's about your plan, right? So I understand the staffing issues, I understand that there's a lot of stuff that happened, but to a certain point, I think we all have to stick to it.
Agreed. Hence the that urgency. We all need to hold each other accountable to that. We got to get this work done.
Thank you all. I just have a couple questions on each topic. On the strategic plan, can you update us in the community on where we are with staffing for additional data support? Because I know you've carried a lot of it, Assistant Superintendent Parks, but we obviously need more support. And as we're committing to this data dashboard and shifting culture to be more data focused, where are we in terms of staffing that?
We're close. I'm hoping within the next 2 weeks or so, we'll have somebody on board.
Excellent.
Mhm.
And they'll be able to help alleviate some of that pressure.
I mean, I think it's fair to give them a fair onboarding time and training, but yes.
Okay, great. And then will, for priority number 1, students first, with the student leadership survey and the students being involved in crafting the plans, will the BOE be updated on that? And will we be able to see the responses to those surveys that are sent out? We were presented with those once a few years ago, and it was really interesting data. And I think it was really helpful and enlightening for the BOE to see. And so I'm curious if we'll be looped in on that.
Yes, but first I want to make sure that the students get their eyeballs on it. So the timeline that I see is it's going to be in early September that we're able to get student leaders and some adults at each high school trained up on this idea of representational leadership and leadership for diversity. Then once those groups are formed in the schools, their first task is going to be to review that survey data so that they can start writing their own strategic plans. I would hate to give you an exact date because I really firmly believe that this one needs to be student led, and it is, but we just have to get them there.
Okay.
Yeah. My hope is that I would love to see next year, like some students from each group talking to you about the work. That's my goal.
I would love to have some students on the
Yeah.
school board.
Yeah.
So if we can push that, that's been something that I've been hoping to push us towards for a few years, but I've never
Awesome.
really had the capacity to get there. So
That sort of answer where you are?
it does, yeah. And as much as you can keep us looped in so that if we could kind of do those things at the same time or try to track them together, if that work makes sense to align. It's one of the things that I still would really like to and hope to accomplish in my time on the board.
One of the things I hope you all maybe noticed, the neon green cords at graduation. Those are students who are on the Equity Advisory Council, which is a district-led council that has a really robust and representative group of students from every school. I think we still need to get Bridges. So every school minus Bridges. Director of Student Family Services, Kelly Medina, who's here, facilitates that team. We have incredible now kind of student leadership on that team. There's a lot of enthusiasm for new leaders. I think that when we think about parent leadership, starting at the school level, moving to some of these district level committees, I actually think that we're starting a pipeline to be able to realize that because we have a bunch of kids now on Equity Advisory Council who are pretty fired up about policy. And so they're getting really interested in the work that you do. And I think it's something that we can bring to them next year about starting to, come and observe and then start to explore some of the technical components of what would it take to get student board members. But I do think we're starting to build a base of interested students who care about policy and governance.
Great, thank you. And then on safety and security, I just had a couple of follow-up questions. So you said we're gonna run site assessments again in 25, 26. Is there anything major that you identified in 23, 24 that we haven't been able to tackle during this year? Or is there anything on that list from 23, 24 that you wish we had the funds to do, the capacity to do, that we haven't been able to do?
I wouldn't say, it's like I said before, we can put all the funding into gadgets and things, but really it's the people that make it work, right? So my big focus when I got here was entry control and just getting that, hey, stopping people at the door, identifying who they are, and now getting that sign in, sign out system. Securely as part of that, kind of piloting that system is advancing that entry control. And hopefully we can get it out in at least in the high schools next year, along with the e-hall pass. But that's really a thing. I don't look in terms of like big ticket items. I think that'll come with long-term planning. We're adding some fencing at Sopris that'll help kind of delineate the campus a little bit because it is in a neighborhood and kind of keep people away, hopefully off our campus during the middle of the day while kids are outside. It's things like that we can build into our long-term planning. I don't think there was anything glaring to your point again with the SRO, obviously that'll skew the score a little bit for Glenwood schools as opposed to Basalt or Carbondale schools for next year, just because we don't have it, stuff like that. But I mean, really my focus a lot when I go into things is how are our people operating what we have or simple systems? Because if we don't work with simple systems efficiently, all the putting money into things won't help that much.
So you think for the most part, been able to tackle the small projects and make progress towards?
Yeah, absolutely. Like we had a door lock. So we had like classroom doors need to have interior locking doors, but we had a lot of areas that were not designed to be classrooms that are now used for student use. So last summer, after I spoke with you at the end of the year, we went through and we audited every building and we added those interior locks to those areas. Some places we didn't have numbering on our exterior doors. So that helps emergency response. We're now going to tackle that this summer. With the entry control stuff, we have sign in, sign out for staff and things to add those kind of things. So yeah, we've been able to keep moving forward without having those big ticket items, I guess you'd say.
Great. Thank you. So we'll move down to 1 second. So we'll move into 5 minutes of open discussion from the board.
I did have additional comments I wanted to make for strategic priority 3.3 DOCOMs. I think you've heard it from the board, the need for a PIO. And I just want to reiterate that I think it's really important. I think we're going to continue to need communications. I think we're going to continue to have issues that are going to arise where we're going to need a good PIO. And so I have to say it. I think it's important. I also just wanted to mention one more thing in regards to your 3.1 equity audit. I also mentioned this before, and I think it's really important for me to restate because we put it's been completed. But the equity audit that the board asked for was not on operational excellence. It was on, and actually I pulled it up because I wanted to make sure a clear definition of the areas to be reviewed, such as student achievement data, course offerings, disciplinary practices, and resource allocation, the process for conducting the audit, including data collection methods, stakeholder engagement strategies, and the selection of an independent third-party auditor, a time frame for completing the audit by the end of 2024, committing to utilizing the findings of the audit to identify and address systemic barriers hindering student success, informing the development of future strategic plans that promote equity and close achievement gaps, and establish clear benchmarks and metrics to track progress toward achieving educational equity. So I appreciate that you added it to 3.1 because I actually think that might be a good practice for strategic, for your 3.1 on operational excellence of having an audit about our staff. But I think it's really important to also state that according to ADB, the audit is more a reflection of what our student success is as opposed to our staff. So I wanted to make sure I mentioned that. Thanks, sorry.
And that, did you have something?
Go ahead.
I just wanted to do have a little bit of a follow-up from a comment from last board meeting. And when I had asked the question, what are we doing specifically for our English language learners? And there was a big response about what our strategic plan is doing and all the different components of what the strategic plan is doing. And I agree with all of those components being important parts of us making sure that we are being better teachers, we are being better deliverers of curriculum, that we are taking all best practices into account. At the end of that comment, it was mentioned that it's more than just language. And I agree with that wholeheartedly. My question is, though, what is it that we are doing about students' language need that is different because they have a different need as a language learner? And where in the strategic plan is that different need being addressed, is I guess what my question is.
I would say, and then I'll let Dr. Park add to this, or Joel as well, if there's anything you want to add. I would say that the way we address student language needs varies by program in our schools, especially at the elementary level, in terms of how we meet those needs based on that program that school offers. And so the detailed technical components of schedules and staffing and groupings of students varies per program. And so what I would say what we're doing differently is deeply interrogating, using data, the success to which those programs are delivering for emerging bilingual students. And we're building in more checkpoints, more accountability systems to be able to look at our CLDE program reviews and say, how is that program delivering to student outcomes? And are we getting the efficacy that we need from that lever, from that team, from that structure, which will then enable us to ask those kind of technical questions of what needs to happen at this school and this program for this group of learners. But I think at the higher level, what we're doing is saying schools, programs, district is accountable for many indicators of student success in ways that we haven't been paying attention to before. So I think it will lead to those conversations of what do we do differently for second graders who are, have been in our CLDE program since they were kindergartners, aren't making progress. What are we doing at this school to address those needs, which might look really different from a different school?
And I guess I would just ask, what are we doing? Like, and we look at our in-year measures this year, and again, our Latino students fell further behind compared to our Anglo students in our in-year measures. So specifically, like to there, where is that point of attack?
I think something that we can do better in a more nuanced way is actually when we're sharing our data, looking at it by language status, because I think you would agree that a newly arrived student would not be able to perform immediately the same way that a fluent English speaker would be. And so that is something I think we could do better to just paint a more accurate and clearer picture. And when we're thinking about the outcomes by race, we're also actually looking at it by language status to say, like, where is the challenge truly? And have it be a more targeted response.
And at the same time, I think it's important as, yes, we need to look at it by the language status, but as you were saying, a newcomer isn't going to be able to achieve at the same level as somebody who has been here throughout these years. It's also important to make sure that we're looking at our instruction there. Is it targeted then to that learner?
Correct. And I just want to clarify, I meant on a test in English.
Okay. And I agree on the
clear.
test in English, and I'm meaning the same also.
I just wanted to offer a few extra comments here in support of Director Ramirez's support for a PIO. I know we're going to take a little flack for putting another position at the district administrative level, but I do believe it is important for the achievement and safety of our schools. I also just wanted to end this comment period with an observation that our staff has done tremendous work this year, exceptional, unbelievable mountain moving level work to get us through a financial crisis, to move us forward in the strategic plan in a way that our district has never been, to help guide us as a board in making historic level commitments to closing achievement gaps in our community. And we will continue to hold Dr. Cole accountable. That's our job. She's our employee. We have discussions going about superintendent goals already. But her management leadership has been noteworthy in this time for our district. And I truly believe that. I just want to take up 10 more seconds congratulating staff at the building level, at the district level. They have done what no other district has done or no other staff in our district has done before. And we see it, we appreciate it so much.
Here, here.
Thank you all. We'll wrap this up. At this time, we welcome members of the public who have signed up to address the board. There are 3 speakers signed up tonight. The board allots 45 minutes for public comment. To respect the time of all who are present, speakers are asked to limit their remarks to 3 minutes or less. A reminder to all speakers to uphold our procedures for public comment. We ask that you be thoughtful and constructive with your comments, and thank you in advance for sharing your feedback. Members of the public who wish to share their views with the board may always do so in writing at any time. For this evening's public comment, we received 1 written comment. The first speaker tonight is Alan Munoz.
Hello, members of the board. My name is Alan Munoz Valenciano, and I'm the regional manager for Voces Unidas de las Montañas. And I'm here to express our grave concerns with the district's failure to take action on 3 long-term plans to once and for all eliminate the achievement gap, transform parent engagement in decision-making spaces, and diversify the workforce of the district to reflect the student population. Voces Unidas is now engaged with 3 different superintendents and soon to be 3 different school boards. Yet no action has been taken. When the school board hired the last 2 superintendents, you assured the community that addressing the achievement gap would be a bold and urgent priority. It has now been 12 months since your most recent superintendent hire and over 24 months since the previous one, and we still see no tangible progress. Since 2023, our organization has repeatedly called for long-term master plans in school board meetings and in one-on-one conversations with the district. And over the past year, we have met more than 12 times with Superintendent Cole in good faith to discuss the creation of these 3 plans. We are clear to her and acknowledge understanding as evident by her own notes from each meeting. Time and time again, meeting after meeting, we were told that a timeline or a public announcement was coming about the community process to develop these 3 plans. Superintendent Cole continues to misinterpret our conversations. Our meetings with her were never about strengthening or refining the current 5-year strategic plan. Instead, we demanded action on broader, more comprehensive plans. The narrative presented on slide 24 in today's superintendent report is not true. To be clear, Voces Unidas has not released an opinion, nor were we part of the development of the district's current strategic plan. For a year, we are made to believe that the school district was making progress behind the scenes, but that turned out to be false. We were misled into believing that the planning work was being done and has greatly impacted our trust in the district. As we end this school year and prepare for school board elections, we need to know if this board and the superintendent will do the necessary work that we've been clear about from the start. Will Superintendent Cole begin the work to start to develop 3 new comprehensive plans that will transform the district? For the record, we're not asking for a 5-year strategic plan. We need a master plan that thinks about potentially 5 strategic plans into the future and work backwards to this next school year. We cannot solve what we cannot visualize, call out, name, and know how much it costs. This inaction and behavior is unacceptable. A 40-point achievement gap is unacceptable. Excluding Latino parents from decision-making spaces at the district and school levels is unacceptable. District decision makers at all levels not reflecting the student population is unacceptable. Doing the same thing the school district has done over and over, superintendent after superintendent, school board after school board, is unacceptable. We need this board to give guidance and directives to Superintendent Cole as it relates to eliminating the achievement gap, transforming Latino parental engagement in decision-making spaces, and diversifying the workforce to reflect the student population of the district. This must be spelled out to the community in a clear and concise manner. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Katia Gonzalez.
My name is Katia Gonzalez, and I work for Voces Unidas as a parent organizer. Our organization began organizing parents in the district in response to decades of neglect and poor results for the largest student demographic. Latino parents for too long have felt unheard and unseen when it comes to their children's education. And not because we have not advocated for ourselves, we have. But because somehow our advocacy, past and present, was never enough, or the way those in power preferred it, or it was disregarded because we have been seen as having less power and influence. Year after year, the school district has failed to implement the hard, bold reforms that would have prevented a self-made 40-point achievement gap. For decades, Latino children have enrolled in the Roaring Fork School District as kindergartners or preschoolers, and the system, decade after decade, failed to meet those students where they were. Instead of addressing the system issues and providing the intervention needed to catch them up, the system promoted them, the same students, grade after grade, all the way through high school. At every grade level, despite the great intentions of teachers, principals, and the administration, the gap just grew larger. And the types of intervention and support needed to undo the damage became both intellectually and financially beyond the capacity of the district. At every grade level, despite the great intentions of teachers, principals, and the administration, the gap just grew larger, and the types of interventions and supports needed to undo the damage became both intellectually and financially beyond the capacity of those experienced of those in the leadership. Aspirational statements and wishful thinking strategic plans became popular as a way to disconnect the blame from the problem from the system. After all, it was easier to blame poverty or immigration or our culture for the problem the system helped create and exacerbated by inaction than to be forced to come up with a plan to actually solve it. Multiple generations of Latino students have been through the Roaring Fork School District, and no superintendent, past or present, or school board, past or present, has had the political courage to challenge the status quo to directly tackle the system's issues straight on. As you know, we feel we are at an impasse with Dr. Cole and are working with her to determine whether or not she wants to be bold and make the drastic changes that are required, or whether she too will do what every past superintendent has done. We need the board to make your commitments public and give guidance to the school district leadership. Will we keep the status quo, or will we have the political courage to make a big, bold change to once and for all develop 3 plans that would eliminate academic achievement, transform parental engagement, and diversify decision-making roles? Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Alex Sanchez.
Hello, Alex Sanchez. I'm the president and CEO of Voces Unidas. My family and I have been advocating for changes in this school system and in this valley since we moved to the Roaring Fork Valley. I enrolled first as a 5th grader in Basalt Elementary School. To date myself, Judy Happenstall was the Basalt Middle School principal a year later when I entered Basalt Middle School. As my colleagues have stated and will state tonight, and as our community leaders have consistently over the years of the organization since our founding in 2020 have said, we have had enough with the status quo. We cannot continue to do the same thing over and over and over, decade after decade, and expect a different result. We refuse as a community to accept the excuses, the apathy, the low expectations, the lack of expertise, the lack of political courage over the decades that have led to and exacerbated the 40+ point student achievement gap we see today. White parents would not accept this. Neither do we. If this was happening to white children in this entire valley would be up in arms. Fix this a long time ago. Why then are we okay with this status quo? Why haven't we had the courage to figure it out? Why haven't we even visualized what that future could look like. And why haven't we started doing the work, giving that we are 10, 20, potentially 30 years behind the ball? What interest does a broken school district serve? What interest? Who benefits from poor student outcomes? We are asking you, the school board, the administration, to break the long-standing cycle of poor student outcomes and do what no superintendent, no school board has ever dared to do, to imagine and map out what it would take for us to once and for all fix these issues and then go and do it. Go and create the political every business. We need every municipality. We need every group, every single town coming together to support the investments that we need to be making, the transformational change that it will require. Children deserve better. Voces Unidas stands by and ready to work with the administration of the school board when you're ready. Thank you so much.
Thank you. The next business in order is a 25-26 budget discussion with Chief Chicoine. Each board member will have 2 minutes to share comments or ask questions. Chief Chicoine, do you want to give a high-level overview before we jump into that?
Thank you, Director Kohlenberg. We have reviewed this already for an hour, so I'm hoping one of my greatest hopes is that you guys get kind of tired of me looking at all the budget information so that we make sure that we're thoroughly understanding the budgets and really can dive in and really starting to make some headway to financial excellence for 25-26 school year. So that's our real hope. We did do a pretty deep dive in the work session, which I'm really grateful for my colleagues that helped with that information. We had Stacy there, Ben. We had a lot of really great discussion around expenditures so that we can understand the budget more thoroughly than we have in the past, which was one of the big goals that we were really focused on for this next year. So Jonathan, if you go down a little bit into this page towards the bottom, towards right there. So the one thing I want to note, it's a really high level overview, is if you look over to the right, there's the surplus use of fund balance, and this is for your general fund, is negative 1,864,072. Okay, so that's right next to the note A that's in red. So that 1,864 number, that includes a carryover number of 1,860. So there is about a $5,000 loss in the budget, but that really, to me, on a $90+ million budget is a break-even budget. So that's a really great thing on a what's called a recurring basis. That means that year over year that we're not going to have a deficit that's going to show up year over year. This is really showing a balanced budget, which is exciting. We've really tackled a lot of overages over the last couple of years. As you guys are aware, we went through and all the analysis and the estimations and things like that really came up to a balanced. So that was really huge. And that's even after the deep dive that we did in making sure that every budget is fixed to the best of our ability. People are understanding, budget managers are really able to manage their budgets better than ever. And so it's not just the CFO looking at the budget, it is like a lot of different eyes to make sure that we're catching things before they get to the board level if there is any error or omission in the budget. And so we're really confident in these numbers, which is really great too. So next I'm going to go to the first read. Yes. And so thank you. So if you go down, I'll go up a little bit. Yeah, right. Yeah, there you go. To the budget assumptions. We're just focusing really in on the general fund for this particular
information and for this work session. We're going to work on a lot of the other funds for the June 11 work session because we have $150 million to go through in a couple of board meetings. So it's a lot of information. So that's why we're trying to get it broken up a little bit. But on the general fund, our largest revenue source is our per pupil revenue from the state. And so we have a funded pupil count of 5,627. Per pupil funding from the state is $12,633 or $71.1 million in total program funding. Now, when we're looking at our property tax value, the net assessed valuation, that's the value of all property that's assessed in the school district, is $2,131 million. With the mill levy of 41.538 mills is what's being estimated, a local property tax of $88 million roughly. And that's across all funds. That includes the bond fund, okay? Okay. So if you go down to the next slide. Okay, so we have raises for all staff of 1.8%. We were really hoping to get a little bit more than that, but that was really, and that is for just a step for experience. The executive team received 0%, no step. And then Medicare and para, those are required expenses for from CDE or from the law for para Medicare that we have to set aside. Health insurance increased the premium from $10,500 to $12,972. Everybody knows we've got issues with health insurance in this valley, and we're going to continue to work on that. Great gratitude to the IBB and the Health Insurance Committee for all the work that they've done this year to try to mitigate that the best we could. But we did get to the best plan with the monies that we had. We really eked every dollar out as the bottom line shows. So if you go to the next slide, general fund projection looks like we're running about a potential favorable variance right now of 250,000 compared to where we were budgeted with all of the supplemental budgets and things like that. So that's pretty close. So we're going to have to monitor this pretty closely. We've got to look at our health insurance fund as well and see where that's gonna fall at the end of the day. If you go to the next slide. General fund highlight. We've got this one shows the recurring deficit of $5,742 that I noted earlier, which I would consider on 90+ million to be balanced. That is such a small percentage. And then looking at our reserve balance, there are unencumbered reserves currently at $935,000, but when we're comparing it to our minimum fund balance policy, that's pretty tight. I'm just going to say that there's not a to move. So we've just got to really monitor this. As we've talked about with our expenditures, we don't have any contingency, anything that could, that is saved or set aside for something that could go wrong on our maintenance or any of those kind of funds. So that we're still pretty tight. But at least we're staying above our minimum fund balance right now, and we're going to continue to work on improving that our financial outlook, but that's pretty good. Actually, I'm really happy with where that landed compared to where we started this situation with all the different things that we had solved for. That's a pretty good outcome, really and truly, because we want to spend as much as we can, but not down to the quick. That's a little too far for cash flow purposes and other reasons we've talked about throughout the year. If you go on to the next page. Future outlook, we still have some things to solve for, even though we've solved for quite a bit. We still are in the thick of it, looking at the federal funding unknowns. There's a lot of things that we've heard about potential cuts, student enrollment, declining enrollment reductions, looking at what the state is doing from going to 4-year averaging to 3-year averaging, watching the per pupil revenue forecast from the state. And some of the costs that we're going to have to add back in the budget that were part of a one-time saving, because we had quite a few expenses. I think it was around 16 million to solve for over 3 years. So we had to do a lot to get here, but we're in a good spot and we still have a couple of things to solve for. If you go to the next slide, I think we've really talked about a lot of the general fund revenues publicly before, so I don't believe that we really need to go through this in much detail, but it's available for anybody that is interested. Keep going. If you could go to the next slide, please. And this is just a discussion of total program funding, which we've talked about. Next slide, please. Other local funding. And can you take that? I don't know what that totaling number is. Let's see.
19.7.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Director Tyler. So we receive roughly 3,504 per pupil for our local revenue. Thank you. 19.7 million. So that's a lot less than the 71.1 million we get through our total program funding. I just want to note that. If you go down to the next slide. And then state funding, this is other state funding besides total program funding, is 3.4 million. So that's there's some other set aside funding for READ Act and transportation that is required to be used for those particular purposes. ECEA, which is special education, and ELPA. Those are the large portions of that 3.4 million. If you go down to the next slide. Federal funding, it's 2 million, which we're kind of grateful for right now, given the potential cuts. But it's a smaller number compared to what we have with our PPR. If you go down to the next slide. Okay, so the only thing I'm going to note on the general fund expenses is that our salary and benefits are 84% of our budgeted expenditures. That's a lot. That's a high percentage for an organization, even a service organization and a school district. That's pretty high. But that just shows how lean the budget is. I think that's a really good indicator of how lean the budget is. And instructional expenditures over 60%. That's pretty good comparatively to other districts. So that we're running over that 60% margin is good. If we go to the next slide. So I think I'm gonna leave the rest of this presentation because we've reviewed a lot of this in detail during the meeting. And so if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to take them.
Director Tyler, are you ready to?
Yes. Chief Chicoine, thank you for the presentation and thank you for the time you spent with us in our work session. And I feel like I had my questions answered during that time with the questions I had coming in. But I want to once again say what what Lindsay DeFrady said earlier. I'm not getting our term right. And thank you and your staff that have done an amazing job to get us to the point where we can have a balanced budget. And so congratulations on creating a balanced budget. And I think it's outstanding that we've gotten to the point where we have. So you and your staff, kudos.
Thank you very much.
Director Ramirez?
Yeah, I echo the sentiments. As we talked about this during the work session. When I became a board member, it was really difficult to try to get any information on the budget. So I appreciate so much our commitment as a board and from our team to have things such as the finance committee has really helped us engage in conversations, be better prepared maybe for us approving a budget, and be able to give us more opportunity to interact with the budget, understand what it is that we're approving. On that note, I also wanted to just mention, thank you for the balanced budget. Obviously, it took a lot of dedication and time. I did want you to mention the potential of an additional loss for the health insurance. I think it's important to note that, at this time, we're still trying to figure this out.
Yes, absolutely. So we received what's called an IBNR report, incurred but not reported claims report, that showed that we had an additional $1.3 million estimated that we were going to still need to pay. Now, this is an estimate, and so that's why we're ferreting this out. But if that were true, that would mean that we would have another $700,000 overage. And that's why we've asked our actuary to talk with us and look at our actuals and see what the accuracy is of that, because I do question the accuracy of that report. And that's the basis of that number. We can certainly hope that it is going to come in better than that, but we're making sure that we go into a lot of detail on that. And then we're going to have an update for you on June 11th on additional information. And we'll have we expect we'll have the final numbers on outcome of that self-insurance in August.
One of the things that I also wanted to mention is obviously your experience has helped us navigate this budget, and in the process we found a lot of errors. Can you speak a little bit to our systems and what you've worked towards to get us to where we are today?
Sure. Thank you. Well, okay, so yeah, we have had quite a few errors in the system, and I think
what I like to say is it's not about the people, it's about the process. And so when you're looking at budget systems, there has to be a systemic approach to your budget. And the systemic approach needs to include multiple eyes on financial information. It needs to be understandable. It needs to be in a format that is accurate, that has been verified. And so those are the types of systems that we've added in, and checks and balances we've added in, and just making sure that our budget managers are now educated and are budget savvy and financially savvy, and doing training with them so that they understand what they're looking at and how to run their reports in IV, even simple stuff like that. But it all culminates into a very big difference in accuracy when you put those things into place, in a greater measure to what they should have available to them.
Thank you. I also wanted to know our conversation on ECE, on the Early Childhood Fund. Can you share a little bit more about that fund? I know it's in year 2. Can you share about what we'll be receiving at the beginning of next year?
Yeah, for sure. Anna, do you want to talk about ECE a little bit? And
Sure. You know, we have the early childhood program runs because of about 1.3, which we're projecting to be a $1.4 million investment from the K-12 general fund. You know, we could talk about why we make that investment. I know all of you have some personal connections to early childhood from your lived experiences and many roles and hats and histories that you all wear. And I don't need to make the argument of why early childhood matters. What we've seen over the last couple of years is that mill levy overrides, increasing cost of health insurance really makes it hard to support and sustain that budget. We are currently, I think the budget we've projected for early childhood is based on a slight increase on this year's revenue, which comes primarily from UPK and tuition. So we're anticipating a slightly increased revenue because we believe we'll be able to have more students this year, and it's based on fully staffing our team in all available classrooms, which, as you all remember, we weren't able to do this year. We had wait lists, especially at schools like CRES. And I'm trying to think again, CRES, I think maybe Riverview. I know CRES for sure had empty classrooms and wait lists of 40 kids. And because we weren't able to find staff, we couldn't fill those. So we're planning to have all of our spaces utilized. Our enrollment's tracking pretty well right now, with some kind of areas of concern where we see that lagging. We won't hire if we don't have the kids. And if we do have the kids, then I actually think we'll end up doing a little bit better on the revenue side through UPK and tuition. That we talked about this a little bit in the board work session, and I think that, it's interesting. And I want to appreciate Rodrigo Andrade, who wears a lot of hats in the district and wears them all very, very well. And he's also wearing now a grant writer hat. And so he's done astounding work for us in early childhood, really coordinating and leaning into some grant writing for ECE, which we've never had really the capacity to do. And he's doing it phenomenally well. And one of the things that we've really explained and is true, and the board raised these concerns in the work session, is that as our K-12 budget comes more and more under duress, it puts more stressors on our ability to invest this much in early childhood. I think we need to do, and I take this on myself as the person who's kind of supported ECE, I think we need to do a better job of really naming the role that we fill in early childhood in the community. We knew we couldn't be everything to everybody. We're not the most dynamic and flexible program. We offer a program really designed for our target population, which is students with disabilities, students from families whose income is below the federal poverty level, emerging bilingual students. And if we have additional space beyond that, we fill it. And so I think that it's something that we need to watch. I will also name that it wasn't until this is the second year we've had an early childhood education budget. So we've never been able to have these conversations before and look at enrollment trends and patterns and staffing, because we've never been able to pull this out of the K-12 budget. So in a lot of ways, I know it's frustrating, and we're having really important conversations about the value of this program, which frankly, we were never even able to have before because we couldn't put a number on it. And so I think these are the right questions. I think this is the right level of scrutiny that we're looking at in that program. I think we have to look at enrollment. I'm so grateful for Rodrigo's capacity and talent, because I also think we cannot do this alone. We know that the revenues that we get from the state and the federal government to support special education at early childhood pales in comparison to what we invest. We are the only program in this valley that accepts students and never expels a single student from preschool. We meet kids and we meet their needs and we staff appropriately depending on what the kids need. And that has come to a cost of our K-12 education budget. And it's going to be something we're going to have to tackle.
Thank you. I guess just to clarify my question, I wanted you guys to speak about the fact that come fall, you guys will be bringing us in our quarterly statement the overage of, or the money we have not utilized this year.
Yeah, I mean, as we see the kind of those quarterly financials and we get those fund updates, what we've done so far as we got into the third quarter is we're kind of waiting for the dust to settle in the final UPK revenue, the final tuition revenue, with preschool to really understand I'm going to get into 24-25 to understand for the 24-25 school year, how much of that 1.35 million that we budgeted for to preschool actually is needed. There's a forecast in the budget materials of what we think is going to be needed, a little less than that. But, I was looking at numbers with the preschool team today and they were saying, oh no, we're still going back and forth with UPK about enrollments that we had in August and they still owe us money for. So there's still dust to settle there. But yeah, that'll be part of those kind of end of year financials to show whether we really did need to allocate that full 1.35 from 24-25 to preschool.
I'm sorry. Again, because what I'm seeing here, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but is 1.355 for this year or for this upcoming year, or for this last year?
Upcoming.
Okay.
Oh, sorry. I thought we
It's
increased.
1,255,000 for this year.
I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. No worries.
Yeah. So the
Mhm.
reason
Thank you.
thank you,
Yeah,
because
it's fine.
I was like,
just have
wait
it
a minute.
memorized.
And the reason why I bring that up is because we are increasing it from this year. And so I want to be very clear as we move forward, the money that we have not utilized from this year, the board needs to be reported on in the fall. Right? That's the
Yeah.
cadence of the timeline.
Right.
Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. Mhm.
Dr. DeFreitas?
I don't have a lot of questions. Thanks for the time in the work session. I just wanted to appreciate fellow board members who have brought this conversation up to this level over their years here on the board, because again, I come in and am appreciating standing on these shoulders of giants and being able to access this information, assuming that that's just how it's done, because that's what I'm used to seeing in other places. So I just want to recognize the effort and the commitment, the transparency and accountability that my fellow board members have tirelessly exhibited in this conversation. And then also to the staff achieving that. I really appreciate the budget memo that you shared with us and its alignment to strategic priorities we discussed at length in the initial stages of that strategic priority, that it doesn't matter without resources behind it. It doesn't matter if it doesn't drive our financial commitment in the direction of our beliefs and policies. And so I'm appreciating that alignment as well. And that's all I have for now.
I just have a couple things. So, 84% of our budget is salary and benefits, and that's high.
Mhm.
What would you say the average is for school districts?
That would be a great question for the board tracker, but I would
Okay.
say that probably closer to 80%
Okay.
from what I've seen. So it's higher than what I'm used to and working at other school districts.
And then I also just wanted to note, mentioned 0% raises for executive staff and superintendent, which I think is important and good in this financial crisis that we're in, but for the community and for the board to be aware that the more we do that and maintain that, the more out of step we get with comparison compensation packages, and our ability to recruit and retain staff goes top to bottom. We have to be able to recruit and retain custodians all the way up to superintendents. And so I would caution future boards to continue that trend and get us out of alignment, because when we are put in a position to hire, it makes it more difficult to make those leaps in compensation. And it's a difficult thing to explain to staff, to community, to the public. So while I'm supportive of doing it this year, it also causes me pause. Just wanted to note that, because I don't want us to get too out of step with comparison compensation rates for these roles that are critical and pushing our district to make the shifts, make the changes, be where we want to be for students in the long term. I didn't have any other specific questions. I think we addressed them all in work session. So we have 5 minutes of open discussion if anyone has anything else.
Just piggybacking on what you said, Director Kuhlenberg, is that I would like to just, and I meant to say it and I forgot, so I'm glad you brought that up, but I just want to commend the executive team though on their team player mode of not giving themselves raises. And I hear your concern and I think that's true, but I also think it shows a team wearing this together. So I appreciate that. And then I do have a question also on, do we know in our ECE, what percentage of our students pay full tuition?
Because we literally had to report on this today. We have a little over 317 students in the program today.
317?
317, I think somewhere around there. And I believe we identified that 250 of those students receive some form of financial assistance from UPK, CCAP, Early Head Start, District Sliding Scale. Am I getting that right, Rodrigo? Okay.
So 67.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I also had
Anything else?
Sorry.
Go ahead.
We had a question for you regarding the budget managers. I just
Oh,
wanted to follow up to see if you could let us know how many are principals, how many are. I think that'll be helpful to the board, not just a number, but a reference to who we're looking at. And then I also just wanted to make a note because it did come up during the work session. I, as a board member, have a concern with our facilities, custodial, transportation, technology, MILF, technology, and or just those departments, but basically our facilities, running on a very tight budget, with basically no room for error. I know that this is the season that we're in, and I know that we need to be tight. I know that this is great that we're on a balanced budget. I still have a lot of concerns about that. I think if we use the padding this year for us to get by, we should consider the next year with all of the financial challenges we may face. I think it's important for me to voice my concern to the team, and to my colleagues here on the board, because at the end of the day, we need the lights on. We need to have our school buildings to function, to have class, and I think it should be a priority for us. That's it.
And just one more follow-up. I just think it's something that we maybe want to take a look at our tuition rates if we're going to be supplementing preschool ECE. And if we're looking at our 67 students, if it was $10 more per day for those students, that's $113,000 a year. And so I'm not saying we need to be on the backs of those students, but it's something I think we should look at considering.
Thank you.
Okay. Can I just say one other thing? I just want to, just to get through a budget year like this and starting a new position, it really takes a team. And that I'm grateful for the board for all the work that you guys have done and all the direction that you've given in the finance committee and making sure that we do that. That was a really good call. And to our superintendent, Anna Cole, and to our entire executive team and our budget managers, because that is really what made this all happen. I mean, it's it was just running as fast as we all could. And I'm just really grateful for the team that we have. We couldn't have done it without all the right people in the right position. So thank you.
Thank you. The next business in order is the approval of the consent agenda, which includes routine personnel, minutes from our previous board meeting, policies ILBC and IKF, and board certification of the 2025 graduates. Directors, are there any items that you would like to pull off of the consent agenda for a separate discussion and vote? Being none, do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
I move we approve the consent agenda as presented.
I second.
Can you please call the vote?
Director DeFreeze.
Aye.
Director Kuhlenberg.
Aye.
Director Ramirez.
Aye.
Director Titler.
Aye.
Motion passes. The next business in order is discussion on policies JICF, JICA, and JIH. Each board member will have 2 minutes to share comments or ask questions. We'll begin with Director Ramirez, if you're ready.
I guess my updates, we obviously went through this policy committee. We had a lot of conversations around student interviews, interrogation, searches and arrests, which is JIH. I appreciate the team's commitment to us being intentional and clear about just having the conversation on, making sure that there's 2 adults present if there's a student being interviewed. We did have a discussion in regards to exigent circumstances and just that wording. It wasn't something that I think there was like one other policy related to the board that used exigent circumstances, and I don't remember what the update was. Do you remember, Director Conver? There was.
No, I'm pro exigent circumstances.
And I wanted to make sure I brought it up because, we did have a conversation about it. I think it is important for us to be able to have policies that are easily readable in layman's terms. And I think I wanted to bring that up for discussion for the board, just because, again, there was, I think, one other.
Would you like me to give a little background on it?
Yeah.
Okay, so in policy JIH, which is the student interviews, interrogation, searches, and arrests, in the second paragraph, there is the ability for a student to be interviewed by a school administrator without a witness present if there is an exigent circumstance. So if an exigent circumstance arises that requires an immediate interview, we've put that language in, so that would allow that person to interview that child without a witness. If there is no exigent circumstance, there has to be a witness present. And Director Ramirez's concern was that exigent circumstances is not easily defined or could be construed to mean something less than an emergency. I disagree. I think that the meaning of it is that it is an emergency situation. And so we were going back and forth on whether or not we should have that exception. My position is that I'm only comfortable if we have some exception, because if we're in a scenario where a student has a weapon on their person and there's only one person available because there's some other situation going on, I think that our policy should allow for that interview to take place. And I think there was just a discussion about what the appropriate language is for that. So do we want to save that for our 5 minutes? Do you have other questions on these or?
No, so I just wanted to make sure I
Okay.
brought that up. I think the other policies I didn't have any concerns with, but I wanted the board discussion to happen, and that's fine. 5 minutes is fine. And we're done with policy committee.
For the year.
Whoa.
For 8 weeks.
Jonathan,
We have 100
how
more.
many policies we went through? Over 100. So
Can I just tell you, Jonathan is meeting with all of executive team members in the next 2 weeks to tell us all of our summer homework on policy prep. So I'm just.
well,
It doesn't quite.
yeah.
All right, well, if you don't have anything else on these policies, should we make
but-
the rounds and then come back to?
Yeah, but I just want to say, I appreciate the commitment from the team to make policy committee happen. It was really important for us to, especially, again, I think these are committees that benefit the board, benefit the district, benefit the executive team. And I hope we continue to work towards that. To Director DeFreitas' point, to the transparency, to the accountability, to our process and to our systems change. I think it's really important. So thank you.
Those committees don't work without you. So that really, the thanks to you to be there and engage so thoughtfully.
Director DeFreitas, do you have anything on these policies?
No, considering that phrase, I would defer to advice of counsel. They looked at it and what they said. That's kind of all I have based on that. I appreciate the thoughtfulness in the language and the intentionality of our dress code policy. I'm proud to sign off on that one. I think that was built with our values in mind and reflecting the need to allow for student expression while maintaining all those things. It's such a balance, but I'm definitely behind the version that's here.
Great. Director Tyler?
I too, that phrase caught me. exigent circumstances like that stood out to me. And so I'm glad we'll have a little conversation about that. And my only other question is on JICA. Is that the right one? Now I'm losing my page. There we go. I'm curious if you can give a little background of like how it goes from the EAC, because I know I was having an EAC meeting with that dress code and there was discussion about that dress code. And so I tried to look at the history revision and I tried to look back to the document I got while I was at EAC and I couldn't find that. And so I'm just curious, like, can you talk at all to like what impact did EAC have in that? What were the changes that were generated, if any, by them, and what's the process of them being involved and then it coming to the board?
Yeah, I'm so appreciate that question, Director Tyler. And I apologize because it's been on my list to write a more robust memo about what's behind this and how much consultation came into JICA. And I would even start way back when we were talking earlier tonight about disproportionate discipline. Dress code is something that nationwide we know disproportionately impacts students of color. The majority of teachers in schools are white. Bias is part of whiteness. It's part of who we all are, regardless of color. But what we know from the research is that students of color are disproportionately impacted by dress codes. And so it was really, really important to us that we tackle this because the last dress code was very vague. It left a lot of things up to variation. And one of the things that we learned when we started digging into this, we knew this was going to be like sticky because clothing is such a representation of identity and values and culture. And then the way it can be when you have a dress code, a point of tension and power and exclusion in schools can be incredibly problematic. And what we learned in talking to our students, and it was students in the Equity Advisory Council who were brave and bold. And when we hinted this, and I wish Kelly Medina was still here because she's been worried about how to facilitate this policy discussion with EAC for like 15 months now. And she did a phenomenal job. When we dipped our toes into it early in the fall, woof, like fireworks went off with EAC between parents and kids and generational conflicts and teachers in the room. It just brings up even our own team discussions are robust. Everybody has something to say about this. We knew there were sticky issues of equity and disproportionate discipline. Equity Advisory Council, actually, we wanted the parents to pause and we wanted them to listen to their kids. And so Kelly facilitated a fishbowl protocol where our students were at the center and they were students from all of our schools talking about what the implementation of a dress code feels like to a student in a school. And it was a powerful conversation. The parents just listened. Our previous dress code was implemented very differently in our 3 high schools. So the experiences of students varied from 4 high schools, varied from Glenwood and Bridges kind of being like, what dress code? To students at Fork and Basalt saying, oh yeah, this is every day. And when it happens to me, I just go home. I feel excluded, ostracized, gamut of everything we don't want in strategic priority 1, students first. And so what was so fascinating was that in Equity Advisory Council, that group, I think, did the deep work. And at least 3 times this year, we touched on this policy. We then checked drafts with the superintendent student advisory councils at all 4 high schools when Dr. Park and I and Joel Hathaway would go and have lunch with kids every month at every high school. We brought them the drafts. We listened to students at the high schools of their takes on it. I think what really came out to students was they wanted us to be incredibly explicit of what was okay and not okay. They didn't want anything up to individual judgment. And they they cared more about how it was enforced than what was enforced. Like, sure, talk about the details of what we can wear, but what mattered to them more was how we do it, which is why we took this completely away from teachers enforcing this or ever talking to a student about what they're wearing, frankly, and moved it to administrators and deans who we can train to be thoughtful and sensitive. We insisted in the policy that these conversations happen away from other students, happen privately, are leading with discretion, don't ostracize students, don't create tension in their relationships. This was big work this year with our kids, with our community. And so It was nearly impossible. Jonathan's probably still recoiling from the version control of these policies because we had so many different teams working on it. And what it really ended up being was kind of a policy team that Dr. Park, Joel Hathaway, who oversees the deans, Kelly Medina from the EAC standpoint, and I kind of pulling all that consultation back together. As you saw at EAC, we definitely leaned on like other public schools dress codes to say, is this getting it right? I mean, we didn't make all this up original, but there were components that people really, especially in EAC, folks liked. So it's really hard to track the progress, but I think we're really proud of where we landed in terms of going right back to that strategic plan, those initiatives around discipline that's disproportionate for students of color. We got to get this back. This has to get right. And this isn't really important for the board to lean in here at this moment with a much more explicit policy. Did I miss anything? I know it's kind of grandstanding, but this is big work.
It was a lot of work also to just simplify it enough into something very concrete and explicit here. And we didn't have the part at the top. This is the universal dress code, but students are very clear. I see the list of things I can't wear, but I just want to be very clear what should everyone have on.
So that helps clarify. It was more, the EAC was about more process than the exact things that were included.
I think so. And it's been interesting it's a little both and that I think for some of the initial thinking, we really needed like the big kind of fishbowl exercises to elevate the big themes, the lived experiences of our students in our schools. And just want to thank those students for being so brave to take up space in that way. And thank Kelly Medina for creating such a safe space for students to rise. And I think then, we would bring these cleaner iterations back to do a little bit of wordsmithing. Like, did we get it right? Is this right? It's why, I mean, this took all of you.
It took like 2 years, actually. I would say what was really helpful is for a lot of students to say, well, what about this? What about this? What about this? So that was helpful to say, to pressure test actually with the language that we had and said, would that circumstance be covered or clear in the policy?
Thank you.
Before we get into the exigent circumstances conversation, I just had one question on JICF. I'd made a comment about second to last sentence that says the principal or designee will take reasonable steps to deter gang intimidation of students. It's still unclear to me if we're requiring this of every principal in every school. Like, does every principal in every school have to have a plan in place to deter gang intimidation of students and confrontations, or is this triggered by something? I just don't think it's clear with that sentence. And I don't want to create in policy a mandate for our school leaders if that's not what we intend. So I feel like I tried to flag it, but there's just so much going on in this policy that I couldn't really see it. So I don't know if it's like, as the principal deems necessary, if directed by the superintendent. I don't know what the appropriate qualifier is, but it seems like there needs to be a qualifier in front of that sentence. Or is it middle school and high school principals will have this plan in place? Or is it relevant for all school leaders? And
is this CASB language, right? Because it's yellow.
It's green on mine. I don't know. It just doesn't seem clear to me. So.
Wait, are you on JICA?
JICF.
Oh, okay. Because we added to JICA, the individual schools or staff cannot establish additional.
Yeah, I saw that was added. It was
So we just add that.
Jonathan, is that CASB language?
I'm sure it is.
We're talking about JICF, right? Secret Societies Gang.
Yeah, JICF, the second to last sentence.
I mean, what we talked about was that we reference in the discipline matrix if there's something gang related in terms of a response. But what I hear you asking is, does every school need to have a proactive plan to say, I'm aware?
Right. It says that they will take reasonable steps to deter gang intimidation of students and confrontations between members of different gangs on school grounds and school vehicles and at school activities. And so do we want that qualified, or are we saying that they must be taking reasonable steps to deter this, which means they must have a plan or some other, like, to me, this is giving a directive to our school leaders to say that they need to be doing something.
And is there a qualifier of like, if triggered or if directed in some way, they need to do something?
It's good.
I guess that's
a good point.
that was my only other thing on these that I didn't catch earlier. And I had just, like, I had flagged it with like, does this mean middle school or high school or, but then the more I think about it, I'm like, is there some triggering of, I don't know. I just think we should think it through because as it reads right now, it's directing principals to do this. And it doesn't seem necessary in all circumstances and in our communities, so.
This is third read, finally.
This is first read.
This is first read, so yeah, we have time. Yeah, and I have too many pages.
I'm gonna add a comment so that we can actually revisit.
Yeah, I don't think we need to solve it right now, but if we
Mhm.
can just flag it and think about it. And think about how we can adjust that language so it's not giving that direction.
Well, and even just, I think hearing you interpret it that way as, you know, they need to deter it, so they ought to be taking reasonable steps. I read it differently, so even that lack
Yeah.
of clarity is a problem.
Yeah.
Because I read it as like, well, steps if something comes up.
Right, but that's what's unsaid,
Yes,
right?
it's not
That if something comes up or if they're,
If there's evidence of gang activity,
Yeah.
principals need to
Right.
consult
yep,
school safety and security officer, local law
Yeah,
enforcement,
something like
and
that.
take effect. Okay.
and like I said, I don't,
Just send us the edits by email.
yeah.
Okay.
Okay, and then do we want to go back to JIH in our 5 minutes?
Make your
Are you
case.
ready?
Can I say
Oh.
something about?
Yeah,
So one of the things we did talk about as a potential, like threading it, was if we kept the legal language in the policy, and then shifted the discipline matrix, which is actually the more punchy operational tool that leaders are using when they're saying we've got to search, are we, they're going through the matrix, here's what's going on, oh, search the kid, oh, we need to have a witness. And so we did specific adjustments in the discipline matrix, but we did make it more clear that the expectation is that there is always a witness. And so we did it in much more kind of operational language to make sure that that is very.
Said barring exigent or emergency circumstances, ensure a witness is present during a search.
That's the language that's in.
So, I'm sorry, say that one more time.
Barring exigent or emergency circumstances, ensure a witness is present during a search.
I like,
Because we talk through both the exigent and emergency, so no one has to Google.
that's what I was gonna say. I like the fact that emergency is added there at least because if somebody doesn't know what the exigent part means, then I think that's good to have at least emergency there. That's what I was hoping would get out really legal.
I was gonna say, I'll defer to advice of legal counsel.
I mean, I think in policy that, like, I understand the accessibility, I do. I also think that our operational documents are what are going to instruct our administrators, so I don't have the concern that this is going to be like abused by administrators and that this language is going to be used to conduct interviews without a witness present when it's not necessary. I do think we need an exception. I think whenever possible is too lenient to say whenever possible, there's a witness, like there needs to be a witness unless there's an emergency or there is an exigent circumstance. And if we want to be more descriptive, you could say something about harm or I don't know, but then I get nervous about making it too detailed.
I mean, you just basically made my point though, right? Because we said bearing exigent included emergency. And to me, it was like, well, how is anyone gonna know? Right? That it's like an emergency we're saying. So I like that language. I prefer that bearing exigent or emergency. But I also understand like for this policy, like, I mean, I understand that we're saying bearing exigent.
Yeah, I'm fine putting barring exigent or emergency circumstances in the policy too. I think that's.
And that was, I think, the crux of what my point was, is like, a parent is gonna read this. I mean, a parent, any parent is gonna read this and who's trying to get information, or even a student, and might not know what that means. And might have to, like we said, might have to Google it. And so if it just reads like, or emergencies, so here's my thing. We can either add emergency, or if you guys wanna add the discipline matrix in here, or like refer discipline matrix, I'm fine with that too.
Let me go back to that. I thought we had that.
We added it in the gang
Referenced.
activity policy. We added it in JICF. I don't know if we added it in here.
It's cross-referenced.
Yeah. Do you guys have an opinion on if it should just be exigent circumstances or exigent or emergency? I'm fine with either.
I think, or emergency.
Okay.
Personally, but.
Let's add that in those two places then. For all.
Okay.
And do we still think that we need to add the cross-reference on this
It's
policy?
there.
Oh, where am I not seeing it? Where is it?
JK, student discipline.
Oh.
Okay. Then anything else on any of these three policies, and this is just first read?
No. Okay.
Yay, policy team.
Yay.
Great job. I will say that
Should have
this is one of the things that I campaigned about a long, long time ago, was our need to update our policies. And so I'm grateful for the work and commitment. And I think this is really important stuff that actually can have a really large impact on students and families. So I know it's technical, but important. Thanks. Okay. Next business in order is action on approval of the updated facilities fee table. Do I have a motion to approve the updated facilities fee table?
I move that we update the facilities fee table.
Is there a second?
A second.
We'll now have 2 minutes for discussion. Back to you, Director DeFreitas, if you're ready.
Can I ask, was the restructuring of these fees on your radar originally this year, like you were trying to get to, or was there a certain circumstance that drove us to look at them again?
Yeah, great question. Last year, we made some updates just at the staff level to kind of tighten up some protocols and make sure that things like a custodial fee was charged whenever it was a non-student day, to make sure the custodian doesn't come in on Monday from a weekend of use in the building. And custodial work hasn't been done, which had been happening in a lot of schools. At that time, school leaders gave us feedback that they didn't want to raise the fees at the same time that we're starting to be more stringent on our existing structure about custodial fees. So we just held off. This year, what actually sparked this was we're going to move all external renters into an online platform that'll make it much easier to do things like route work orders to make sure that air conditioning or heating's on and all that kind of stuff. As we were doing that, we needed to put a fee table into that. And I looked at our fee table and went, this thing's crazy. Like one room was $12 an hour and another room was $15 an hour and another was 10 and another was 5. And it just didn't make sense. So this is less an effort about increasing fees and more an effort of just streamlining them, but increasing them a little bit, because we do need to, now I mentioned in the memo, now that we are really being mindful of our energy use and shutting buildings down on the weekends and in the evenings, we're going to take 10% of the revenue and put that into our utilities budget just to help cover that. So it was really the combination of those two things.
And there in group one are listed quite a few organizations along with the school district that won't have to pay a fee, including those that have MOUs with us. And that's part of the agreement, right?
That's right. So we're not changing anything fundamental here. We're not even changing board policy. In the past, this hasn't come before the board, but I discussed it with Dr. Cole and decided it's just good for you all and for the public to know that we're updating this.
I appreciate the consistency of information and access, because sometimes it's like, who you know, and oh yeah, we have a room, and this just equalizes the playing field and makes our facilities accessible to our community, which is, I think, a big part of what schools do. So thank you.
Great. Thanks.
Dr. Taylor?
I appreciate the work on this. I appreciate the simplicity of it, trying to simplify the process, both signing up, rate tables. And I find that the fees are very accessible, very inexpensive, and I don't believe like the charge should be an issue. And so I think it's great that we basically offer up at a very minimal amount to anybody our facilities, and I think that's a great service we give to our community.
And some schools really get after it and rent out their facility a lot and have things like churches and soccer leagues that are very consistent year-round users, and they generate quite a bit of revenue from that. So as we do this, we're always working with them to be really careful that we don't disrupt that relationship with a community group and a revenue stream, but also we got to kind of cover our bases.
Dr. Ramirez?
I appreciate that there was a commitment to have equity. Like, just, I think this is great. I think we've had conversations as a team that KF is probably a policy we need to bring forward just to review again. And so I appreciate your guys' commitment to look at our spaces and look at our communities and make this like equitable for anyone in our community, regardless of where they're at, to have access to our school district as the resource that it is. So thank you for that.
I don't have anything additional that hasn't been said. I appreciate the consistency, the clarity. I think I've said a lot of times up here that our school buildings are community assets. And so I appreciate that we are making things more accessible through the online platform and just communication about how they are and should be and can be available to people for a pretty nominal fee. So thank you. And thank you, Dr. Cole, for encouraging this brought before the board. I think it's important for the board and for the public to see it. Thanks for your work on this to get it there. We have 5 minutes. If anyone has anything else.
Yeah, how did you come up with the timpani rental rate?
Yeah.
I haven't seen that line.
Those I can touch. I know there's so many random,
I'm sure.
they're not random, but there's so many pieces of equipment listed there. And that might be the next wave is simplify that and just say any, additional equipment. I don't know if those, really, does somebody pay $5 an hour for the piano when they're renting the space with the piano in it? Probably not. So, this might be phase one of simplification.
Appreciate it.
All right, are there any intervening motions to amend? Seeing none, can you please call the vote?
Director DeFreitas.
Aye.
Director Kuhlenberg.
Aye.
Director Ramirez.
Aye.
Director Teitler.
Aye.
Motion passes. The next business and thank you. The next business in order is future agenda topics, board tracker requests. We'll begin with a request from Director Teitler, who will have 2 minutes to outline his request.
Yes, thank you. I made a request that we look at the Latino and emerging bilingual student data and review that as a board. I think it's very important that we look at the data that is coming out of that dashboard and have the opportunity as a board to be able to discuss that. When we look at what that in-year data is showing, that the disparity between our Anglo and our Latino students is ever growing. That when we look at this year's NWEA math and NWEA reading, achieving mastery data, are beginning of year to end of year, so it's growth from both groups, but once again, the Latino growth is less than the white growth in those scores. And same thing with our MGPs. And I just feel like that is a discussion that as a board, we should talk about and decide how is it that we want that data given to us? How do we want it differentiated? Under what kind of cohorts do we want to be able to be looking at that data? How do we want it broken down? And as we're looking at getting our new data person aboard to be able to come up with a united approach and a united front on what it is that we want in that data, and to be able to just look more in depth of that we haven't had an opportunity to do.
So we'll go into 5 minutes of open discussion as a board. And Dr. Cole, you may join the discussion so we can determine if anyone will hear this as an agenda item. Any immediate questions, comments?
I think I would appreciate hearing, Dr. Cole, your thoughts on this.
Sure. Director Teitler and I have talked about and Dr. Park spoke to it tonight, kind of the more nuanced, wanting to see a more nuanced accounting of student data over time, over cohorts, compared across programming. And I think I absolutely share that. And I know that we have worked a little bit as we went through IHBEA, the CLDE board policy. And then Amy Fairbanks, the director of our CLDE program, presented a template for the board of what that kind of data report would look like. And we still refined that further to get more optics on that kind of data. I agree with Director Teitler that we as a board, administration, governance team need to really dig in and look at, like, educate ourselves on where our kids are at. We do a disservice to the Latino community when we lump data and we make general statements about, not that they're untrue, but we're misrepresenting our students in their language learning journeys of becoming bilingual learners. When we just look at data as Latino or white, it helps when we see the multilingual learner or non-multilingual learner, but even that is not quite as nuanced as like newly immigrated students. There's a set of needs there that is different than students who are long-term emerging bilingual students. And we need to be looking at all of those components in a more, going back to Dr. Park's words, just in a more nuanced way. And I do think it's a piece that we hear often from Amy Fairbanks, from staff, that we are grossly oversimplifying the story of our students. And therefore, similarly, and when you look into programs and cohorts and grade levels, potentially oversimplifying intervention and movement. And so I agree that I think we need to dig in as a team. When, how, like I know that with the cadence that we now have with IHBEA, we are going to have a more robust CLDE program review that takes the board through that data in a more detailed way, in a more comparative way as well, program by program. That's planned for the fall. So I don't know if there's pieces we want to do that are distinct from that. I guess those would be some of my questions. Or is there better ways we should refine that? Do we want to look more at current state data and just look at what we have up against? I think that those are some of my technical questions. I don't know, Dr. Park, if there's anything else that this makes you think about, and we can come back. I just threw that at you. That's what is coming to mind for me right now.
I don't have anything additional.
Okay.
I think you covered it.
Okay.
Can you reflect on staff time and resources and what a timeline like that would look like?
The CLDE program review planned for the fall with the data kernel as presented by Amy Fairbanks is not, I mean, that's on the radar. There's a commitment there. There's the accountability, so that's not a concern at all. I think in terms of how much for this ask we want to do now this year, that would require additional data pools, that we would need to timeline that out if we're feeling like something needs to happen before that fall conversation, given where we're at with hiring and onboarding folks. But there is data we can look at, right? Like, it's not inconsequential what we see on the dashboard. So thank you for that question. I mean, we have some things we could look at. Is it the more nuanced, robust assessment that I think we're hoping to bring to you this fall? No. But is it a place to start? Yeah.
And Director Tyler, you want this agenda item for the next meeting for fall?
I'm sorry, say that again.
Anything more than what's there
There's only one
by the
meeting
next
left,
meeting.
the 11th,
Right.
Yeah.
and I'm hearing that we can't support having this to that meeting.
Yeah.
I don't know what that level of detail I should do more, but I don't have the capacity to do that right now.
Mm-mm.
However, I mean, the thing about.
Mhm.
In
it
addition-
depends on the actual data, we don't.
So sorry, I just wanna, Director Tyler, what was your timeline for this?
I was thinking, my understanding was that we would be discussing this on the next board meeting, and as part of that, I thought the conversation could also include looking at the data that we have now and specifically how we are addressing those data points and what kind of adjustments, if possible, we can make at this point for those data points.
So at the June 11th meeting.
Yes.
Sorry, Dr. Park, you were mentioning capacity wise, you don't think it's doable with what he just shared?
We have our survey presentation is not, if we are very for them, that's what so just fully in your report. In a disaggregated way, I can try, but I can't guarantee actually that we'll have something that we want at helpful level by June 11th, which all the materials are there. And that's
And I understand the nuanced reports might not be able to happen at that point. I think it still would be an important conversation to be able to hold as a board of looking at this is where that data is and is there any adjustments we can make with that data?
Can I,
State has data. So, if you have some progress on that area, you do, right, they're gonna be in article. SAT, PSAT, mass, even though individual score reports are available now, for SAT and the in June, actually, June, like, or June, where this has to be, you won't get any. You won't get any school or just. So, that's part of why they're part two, we're looking at very difficult, for those measures. It's sense and it's feasible to do. And also
I think my take is that the depth and extent of our focus on a cohort that would actually cause action and bring us to a point where we can make a clear decision on path forward. I don't want to rush into it without the full picture. So I would take Dr. Park's direction there on the timeline if others have thoughts though.
I mean, I think obviously this is a conversation that we've been meaning to have. And the executive team was aware of. I also understand just capacity. Like, I think there's a reality here of the type of data that you're asking for that the team needs to be able to bring. And I would hate for us to put it on the agenda and then the team either be overwhelmed or unable to bring what you're asking for. And so, for me, my preference, I guess, would be to have it either as a work session at the beginning of the school year where we can talk about it. And then if there's anything missing before it comes to a board presentation, any other data that we're asking for, that be the follow-up. But I mean, I defer to my colleagues on do we want to cram this in before the end of the school year?
I guess, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I just want to ensure that it's a meaningful conversation because I think that it is important. And so if staff is not prepared or we don't have the data that we need, I don't think that it makes sense for us to push it forward. And my question to you, Director Tyler, too, is there something outside of the data kernel related to IHBEA that you would like to see included in this data that you're looking for here?
And I guess that was my question I was just gonna ask, because when we talked about this data kernel of IHBEA, was that originally planned for when we get this year's data that's gonna be populating that? And so we would be able to, in the fall, have a conversation with that data in front of us. And I guess, and that includes the cohorts. Mhm. Uh-huh. Yeah, then
Dr. Cole, when you say you're gonna try, what do you think is gonna?
Well, we have to get the position hired. So we have to get somebody that can assess the degree to which we can pool. I mean, because what we're talking about, and then we've worked on some sample language that refines some kind of asking the question, what are I'm trying to think of how we phrased it in the kernel. Try being like, can we pull that kind of student data for you all to see it? I just want to be cognizant of new staff and I mean, everything but the new information. I'm sorry, I'm going to jump to
I
this.
have it if you.
Okay, yeah, right, because we had like a language in there. Yes, please. I'm getting there, but slowly.
Graduation rates, PSAT scored across cohorts, across district averages. Parent classes, 15-16 and then 19-20 and then 21-22.
And the purpose would be, what we're trying to get at is to understand the long-term achievement of students who enter the Roaring Fork schools with no English proficiency at various touch points in their tenure, if possible, disaggregated per program. So we're trying to ask, like, what's the long-term impact of an outcome for students in different programs?
And in addition, looking at kindergartners who were NEPs and where they stand in their proficiency at this point and how long they have been enrolled in as emergent bilinguals and what their success is now, depending on where they are in the system.
In which kind of program? And that's slightly different data than what we've pulled before. We're gonna get in there and see if we can do it for sure.
I mean, I think the Dr. Jaffer, or sorry, I don't remember who asked, like, what does it mean to try? I think what's hard right now is I can't answer the question on how clean the information is, like where we pull it, like how we identify the kindergartners who are still here, where they started, how long they're in the program, and which school. I'm sure it exists. I mean, in my taking over this role right now, a lot of things around our data systems that I've learned and the complexities there and the things that I thought were quite easy to do and straightforward to do are layered. And so I don't want to overpromise it, but I think I have a better understanding of the question. I just wanted to name that. And I know I will be spending the summer training whoever is hired, but understanding that they also have not lived in the systems here. And it takes time to learn them. And I think that we can pull some information, maybe the most recent information.
I think it's fair to, if it's possible, let's ask the question again. I will bring you an answer by the end of August, because at that point we'll have people in place. And I can say to that new director of data assessment, to our director of CLDE, what's it going to take to get this? And if they say it's beyond my capacity, then I can figure out how to contract with somebody who can pull it. Does that make sense? Like, give me some time to answer it, because I just, I don't know that whether we're going to have the skills and capacities internally. We haven't for the last 2 years had that. So let me see where we land by the end of the summer and see if our teams can pull it off. And if not, let me try to figure out if somebody externally can do it.
I just want to make sure that the time we're putting into it brings us information, database, decision-making opportunities that actually provide first of all, new information, and that we don't just need to reconstruct some things that we already know very well, which is that we're failing this population. And I want to make sure that if we're putting that amount of time and effort into it, that we're asking the right questions, and that the answers to those questions, Dr. Park, in your opinion, would actually be able to drive, clarify, and justify a reallocation of resources based on what you find. And I think if the answer is like, I'm not sure how we would use those, then maybe we need to double check that we're asking the right question, because we do need to move resources around. We're driven by our policies to find a way to close this gap, but we already know that. And so what is it that you need to know? Or what is it that we as a board need to know to be able to justify those changes at the scope and scale that we're looking for? And are these the right questions to push us there? I want to make sure that when we're investing this much time into it, that it's, does that make sense? Am I way off there? I just want to make sure we're not building a really fancy answer to a question that we don't. I don't want to make sure we're asking the right ones, and that then data can drive our decisions from there.
I feel like we've never had this data that gives us this information, and that this is our most vulnerable learner right now that we have. And we need to make sure that we are programming in a way that is going to meet the needs of that student. And I think that this will give us that data to be able to look and see how that is working for that student.
Based on because it's including a perspective of which programs. Is that
correct?
Okay.
So you think by the end of August, you'll have an understanding of if there's internal capacity to draw that specific data. The remainder of the data in the data kernel is what you're looking for, Director Tyler. So we're in agreement that we'll do this at the end of the summer. Why don't we plan to have a conversation between superintendent, board president in August about, hey, this is where I think we are in capacity. And then we can bring it back to the board if we need to have the conversation about if it is data that we want to push forward and get, and what the time monetary costs will be of getting it, because we're not going to solve for that right now. And so I feel like the plan moving forward is, yes, we're going to be presented all of the other data in the fall as part of the CLD programmatic review that's required under IHBEA annually now. Circle back on this specific point that is outside the scope of that. And that doesn't have to be a full board work session, right? Like that can be a touch base with superintendent, board president can make a, hey, yay, we can do this. We'll let the whole board know, or no, we can't. We need to schedule work session time so we can figure out it's worthwhile to push it forward. Make sense? Yeah. Good, Director Tyler?
I'm not sure. I feel a little uneasy just pushing it down the line and pushing it down the line. And I understand the ability to get this data for 2 weeks from now. That I understand. And so, but I'm reticent to say, we're going to wait till the end of August and then see if we want to do this. And then I think we're back in the same situation that we are right now. And I think we need to make a commitment as a board to say, yes, we want this. And yes, we demand this. And yes, we will have this.
I think the roadblock that we're hitting is that the rest of the board doesn't have the experience and background that you have in this specific subject matter. And so the rest of the board needs to be educated on why that specific information is valuable before the rest of the board can give direction.
Right. And I guess that would be maybe where I think that we could continue to have a conversation in 2 weeks to continue to flesh this out and talk about the reason why it is important and talk about what this data would achieve. And so we could be brought up to speed about that. And maybe that the topic then in 2 weeks is to discuss the reasons why this would be important data for us to have.
Well, I guess my push to us in this moment, I would say that this board cares about data and we care deeply about good data. I would also say that the executive team wants to collect good data, and I would go as far as to say that you guys see the value of data like this being pulled. Does that sound right?
I do. And I would actually reframe what you said, Director Tyler, that August is not about can we do it? It's more about how and what the timeline is.
Okay,
And,
that.
hey, I need another
makes me feel
25,000 to hire somebody to come do
Okay,
this.
I feel more comfortable with that then.
Yeah, that I would say it's a how and a timeline, not a if. Because I agree with you. Like, I think we have to have a more nuanced understanding. And frankly, I want us to also have a more nuanced understanding of achievement. We keep leaning in on one data point. I think that also does a disservice to the hard work of our students, the achievement of our students. I think we need to look more in a more dynamic and complex way of what achievement means. When we look at long-term outcomes of kids, I think there's a lot that we have to educate ourselves on what we mean when we say the word achievement, when we talk about growth, when we talk about academic success. And I think under these particular metrics, this is important.
And as we talk about achievement, I think we also hand in hand need to have that conversation about programming too at the same time of how that meets that achievement.
Yeah, I mean, I feel that like that's what you have to hold me accountable for, right? The board can define achievement in these ways. How are we going to get there?
Okay.
And how are you sure that these programs are working? I think those are the pieces that I feel like we have to be able to back up. And we haven't been able to do that in a super tight way for the board. And I think that's the push you're giving us through IHBEA.
Can I add on one other comment? And we have a lot of information as an aggregate in some ways, right? Like we can see how many kids at each school and years in program and things like that. But the challenge with the specific description at the bottom is it's going by specific cohort and individual student level. And that's why I'm saying, I don't know how clean that data is, but overall information, right? Like, especially if we're thinking about at a program level or at a school, if we see across the student population in a particular school, how many years in program, how like numbers of kids and years in program, like what that spread looks like, I think that could be informative, but there are different data points that I think elicit different questions, but that I think is also helpful and it's important and we look at it too, right? So like these are all pieces that we do look at. But that big comprehensive question on the specific cohort in this time and, across multiple data points, that's where it's been a kind of a challenge. But I do agree with Dr. Cole that in August, it's not if, it's how.
Okay, thank you.
Right. Are we You good?
I'm good.
Okay, we'll now move on to our final agenda item, board updates and appreciations. We'll start with you, Director Titler.
As far as updates, don't have too many other than we met as a housing committee and got our final presentation from our long-term housing plan, and it was presented to us, and it was great information, and it, I would say, raised more questions than maybe it answered, but understanding that we do have a long-term plan, and the big takeaway from it that came out of it was it's going to be hard for anybody to buy a house anywhere in our valley as teachers. And so what are the things that we can do in working with different other organizations to help with our housing, and what it would be the best use of our housing dollars in the future and how to spend that. So that's still all pretty nebulous at this point. So, and that's really the only update I have as far as meetings, but my appreciation, I would say, goes to our district as a whole and the diversity of the student that we educate. And this last week, the different events that I got to attend really all rang true in so many different ways. I got to go to baccalaureate at the high school and got to hear students show gratitude, which really filled me up and was great to see that individual power of all of what we do. And getting to go to the Bridges graduation, which was so different from the Roaring Fork High School graduation. And just to see how we are meeting needs of different populations and different students in different ways was just really powerful to me, and I got to go to CCS this morning and see their 8th grade graduation and presentations. And it just really fills me up to see all the different arms that we are extending to different learners and different styles and different needs. And it just makes me happy for what we're able to accomplish.
Director DeFreitas.
Similar, not a lot of updates. Appreciating the graduation I got to attend at Glenwood Springs High School. That was my first one. And I want to offer appreciation for Gail, who does a masterful job of logistics and cat herding, both student and staff. She's got that down, and it was really exciting to be there and to be a part of it. And I want to appreciate the students and the parents who let me be in that moment with them, not knowing their students personally, but recognizing that it was a tremendous gift to be able to spend that time with them as they got their diplomas and took their way off the stage in various cadences. So I really got to appreciate that.
Director Ramirez. Thank you, Director Kuhlenberg. I wanted to take a point of personal privilege tonight to share some thoughts that I've been kicking around for a couple of months. And by a couple of months, I mean a couple of months. I had asked Director Kuhlenberg for some time to share just a reflection I've had as a board member. So I wanted to take the time tonight to read it. And please have patience with me as I get through this. When I was first elected in November 2019, I remember much of my prayers being focused on asking God for strength. At times, I felt like I was living in the story of David and Goliath, fighting this massive system that was happy with the stories that marred its leadership, content with how it served some, but not all, and satisfied with the bare minimum it gave to those who had the least ability or knowledge on how to advocate for better quality education. The system was content with the status quo, even though the status quo did not work and was continuously pushing students further away from academic success. It failed to honor our district's mission. Roaring Fork Schools will ensure that every student develops the enduring knowledge, skills, and character to thrive in a changing world. It was very much an uphill battle to get us to this moment in time, and I, from time to time, do regret not sharing more about the struggles, the sacrifices, and the sadness that I endured during those first years as a board member. It is cathartic now to remember those moments, to remember that mom who ran because of necessity, full of passion and ambition for her children, wishing with her whole being for her children to have a better experience in this district than she did. As a student of the district, I have often contemplated why, in the Latino community, being a graduate of the district is not often a hero story of success. In our spaces, we share how we became working professionals, entrepreneurs, business owners, or community leaders, in spite of our time at the Roaring Fork schools, because too often, we too are marred with our own personal stories of experiencing racism, microaggressions, macroaggressions, and everything within those walls. Deciding to run for this position for a second term was a truly difficult experience for me and my family. But in those moments of decision, I was reminded of the points at which my strength has actually persevered. Moments in which I, as an elected board member, have dealt with macroaggressions, microaggressions, unprofessionalism, unkindness, and yes, even racism, and how our most marginalized students persevere every day within the walls of our school district, even when we may fail them. I asked Director Kuhlenberg to grant me the opportunity to have a few extra moments for comments, because to be honest, I needed to share all of this. There's more transparency in our systems today than when I arrived. As a board member, I now have more access to answers to my questions regarding the budget, policies, processes, or systems we use in our schools than I did when I first arrived. And for that, I am truly grateful. There's more accountability, more equity for all, and more intentionality and expectation than when I first arrived. Although the work has been slow and in the background, it has not always been celebrated. It has happened, and it has required a tremendous amount of effort and sacrifice to pivot and create better systems and processes for the success of students, staff, and the future of the district. I credit the leadership of President Kuhlenberg for helping move us in this direction, and have immense gratitude for her dedication and willingness to use her privilege to push the district forward, not just for her kids or mine, but for the students of the district, working to move us away from performative actions, behaviors, and statements, and push us towards real progress tied to student outcomes. And I have appreciated the commitment from my fellow colleagues to continue the work and lean in and have a commitment to have better systems and processes in place. We still have a long way to go as a district, and there is still much to pivot and refine. But I am grateful that we have implemented systems like the superintendent evaluation, the finance committee, the policy committee, the district accountability committee, amongst many other committees, to continue the work long after we are gone. It is not lost on me that Latino students in our district hold a significant achievement gap, and that must be solved with the urgency and collective efficacy mentioned earlier tonight during our strategic plan conversation. Our local economies rely on our district to uphold its mission of developing students who will hold the knowledge, skills, and character to thrive. And we owe it to our students and their families to be better for each generation that walks into our doors. Now, more than ever, we need the community, parents, leaders, and students, including alumni, to engage with us and help us improve for the benefit of our students now and into the future. Every student in this district matters, and every student deserves a high-quality education that pushes them forward to be someone in this lifetime. Every student deserves to leave our schools proud to have been a product of the Roaring Fork schools. Thank you.
Thank you. I almost didn't let her do that. Thank you. I'm glad that you got a chance to share that. Thank you for taking the time to put it together. Did you have any updates? Any other updates? No. Okay. I don't have any specific updates. I think we updated about policy committee. I wanted to appreciate Basalt High School for welcoming me to be a part of their graduation, and celebrate that 31 of their students received the seal of biliteracy, which was very impressive and represented a huge portion of their graduates. And then I also wanted to give a personal appreciation to Suzanne Lewis, who I'm gonna cry. She's a kindergarten teacher who's had all of my kids, and she's leaving the Valley.
because of housing and all the things that we've talked about. So tomorrow is her last day. And I didn't think I would get emotional, but since my kids first stepped into our schools, she's been the one there and welcoming them. So it's very sad to see her go. She's had a huge impact on a lot of children. She's gonna be a loss. So and I'm sorry that we as a board and as a district haven't been able to do more on housing and tackling cost of living, but also wanted to use it as an opportunity to push all of us to use our seats, use our power to push on every other government in our valley to do the same to keep people like her here, because the less of them that we have, the harder this becomes for everyone. It's going to be really hard when she's not there next year to welcome kindergartners. So I'm also emotional because my fourth grader graduated today. So thank you to all the BES staff and everything that they do for that. And that was my last appreciation, was just all the work that they do to really create community for the kids. So we had fourth grade graduation today, and then during fourth grade graduation, the eighth graders ran from the middle school to the high school, signaling their big transition from middle school to high school. So it's just really cool to be a part of that community. But a huge thanks to Miss Lewis. And if there's no further business, no objection, the meeting will be adjourned. It's 9:03 PM.